I'd never been a beach house kind of person. Sand in my sheets, salt on my skin, and the persistent cry of gulls like rusty hinges overhead. It all seemed more nuisance than retreat. But when my older brother Logan died and left me the keys to his beach house in Cedar Shoals, North Carolina, something inside me said go. Maybe it was guilt, maybe curiosity, maybe the eerie note he'd left behind with the deed. I tried to stop it. If you find this, don't stay past the third night. The tide always comes for what it's owed. I thought it was just poetic nonsense. Logan was always a bit dramatic. Still, I packed light, told no one I was leaving, and drove 6 hours from Asheville, chasing some combination of closure and sun. The beach house was perched on a bluff above the dunes, its bones worn from decades of wind and salt. It looked like it hadn't seen a coat of paint since the 90s. Gray cedar shingles, slanted porch. The screen door was barely hanging on. Logan had always loved this place. He spent every summer here since he bought it in 2011. I only visited once, and even then just for a weekend. He was secretive about it. The key turned reluctantly in the lock. The smell hit me first. Brine, mildew, and something else like wet ash. The kind of smell that sinks into wood and refuses to leave. The interior was darker than expected, the curtains drawn tight. The living room was small and oddly arranged. A battered leather armchair faced a corner, not the windows or the ancient TV. There was no welcome note, no framed photos, just silence. But the house felt not empty, like someone had just stepped out of sight. I dropped my duffel bag in the master bedroom upstairs and opened the windows to let the salt air in. The sun was setting, casting amber streaks across the sand below. There were footprints on the beach, 2 sets weaving along the shoreline. I didn't remember seeing anyone else during my drive-in. The place felt abandoned. I sat on the back porch with a bottle of beer, watching the waves crawl forward. They never stopped, not even for a breath. Just constant motion, reach, retreat, return. And then I saw something. A figure, down by the waterline. It looked like a man, maybe in his 40s, bald or wearing a cap, standing perfectly still with his back to me. I squinted, trying to make out details, but just then a swell blocked my view. When it passed, the man was gone. I chalked it up to fatigue. A long drive, unfamiliar setting, your brain fills in gaps with nonsense. But that night, I woke to sounds I couldn't explain. Day 1. Echoes in the floorboards the first night in the house. I woke at 2:33 a.m. I remember because the clock beside the bed blinked its red numbers like a warning light. There were footsteps upstairs, which didn't make sense because I was upstairs. The bedroom was in the converted attic, the only upper room. Still, I heard slow, deliberate steps above me, as though someone were walking across a ceiling that didn't exist. I sat up, listening. The steps continued, moving from left to right, then pausing directly above me. I froze. The air grew thick, heavier. I suddenly felt the distinct sensation that if I moved, even breathed too loud, something would become aware of me. The kind of dread that doesn't come from reason but from animal instinct. The steps resumed and faded into nothing. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, the beach looked normal. A few families had set up umbrellas further down the shore. Gulls wheeled overhead. Everything looked perfectly mundane. But on the back porch, near the railing, I found a wet footprint. Just one. Bare, human, pointing toward the house. There was no dew. The wood was otherwise dry. The print hadn't come from me. Day 2. The stranger and the stories. That afternoon I drove into town to grab groceries and clear my head. Cedar Shoals was a speck of a town. 1 gas station. 2 diners. A general store run by a leathery man named Rafe who smelled like pipe smoke and low tide. When I mentioned Logan's name, Rafe squinted at me. "You his brother?" he asked. "Thought you looked a little like him. Different eyes, though." I nodded. He passed a couple weeks ago. Heart attack. Rafe sucked on his teeth. That what they said? I stared at him. What do you mean? He shrugged, like someone who'd already said too much. House up on the bluff, right? Ain't the first time someone left there too sudden. He was cryptic after that, but I noticed a local bulletin board behind the counter. Lost pets, yard sales, and one faded notice that caught my eye. Missing, Kyle Bryson. Last seen May 3rd, 2020 near Cedar Shoals Beach. Age 41. 5'11". Shaved head. Please contact the sheriff's office with any information. I stared at the photo. It was the man I saw on the shore. That night I kept the lights on. I pushed a chair against the bedroom door and sat with a baseball bat I found in Logan's closet. There were no footsteps this time. Not upstairs, anyway. But around 1:50 a.m., I heard the front door open. Not creak. Not rattle. Open. Clean and distinct, followed by 3 wet steps on the floorboards below. I tiptoed to the edge of the stairwell and listened. A man's voice spoke, ragged and low. I left it in the tide. It never let go. It never forgets. I leaned too far forward and the step creaked under me. Silence. Then something darted up the stairs so fast it barely touched each step. I slammed the bedroom door shut and didn't open it until the sky turned pink with dawn. Day 3. The truth beneath the house. The final day I spent scouring Logan's house for answers. In the attic crawl space behind the closet, I found a metal lockbox. Inside were several newspaper clippings, 2 faded photographs, and a weather-stained notebook. The clippings were all about drownings, or more specifically, disappearances from the same beach, all during low tide. 5 people, 1 every 2 years. Logan had highlighted sections. Each incident happened near the bluff below his house. The notebook was his journal. The last entries were frantic, barely legible. I see them now. Night. They come with the tide, leave prints, speak in riddles. They want me to remember, want me to admit it. I didn't drown her. She slipped. It was an accident. But the tide doesn't care. The tide never forgets. That's when it clicked. In 2013, Logan's ex-girlfriend Rachel had gone missing, vanished during a weekend visit. Logan said she left early after an argument, but her car was never found. He was questioned, but no charges were filed. Was it an accident? Something worse? Whatever happened, Logan had buried it, and the beach had exhumed it. That evening, I went down to the bluff. The tide was low. I followed the curve of the beach and found something I'd missed before. A collapsed section beneath the house, half covered in vines. It led to a crawl space carved into the bluff side. Inside, I found a wooden trunk, half rotted. Inside the trunk was a woman's coat, waterlogged and stiff, a phone with a cracked screen, and bones. Not many, but enough. I staggered out, vomited in the sand, and called the police. Epilogue. One more night. I should have left right then. But I stayed one more night, just to see if they'd come again. They did. Around 3 a.m., I heard the waves stop. Total silence. Then the wet steps. Not one but many moving across the porch inside the living room up the stairs. I didn't run. I sat upright in bed and waited. The door opened slowly. In the doorway stood Logan, or what was left of him. Salt-eaten skin. Empty eyes. His mouth opened and a voice that wasn't his poured out. You brought the truth back with you. Now it knows your name. He stepped backward into the hallway and vanished. I left at sunrise. Never returned. The house still stands, but no one owns it now. Locals say it's cursed. Kids dare each other to get close, but no one stays past dark. I still hear waves in my dreams, and footsteps that follow no roof. Because the tide doesn't just take. It remembers, and one day it always comes back. My family's beach house was supposed to be a blessing. That's how my Aunt Patty put it, in her shrill smoker's voice, when she called me after the funeral. Your mama would have wanted you to have it, Elle. That house was her pride and joy. She kept it like a sanctuary. Sanctuary. That word clung to me as I stood at the bottom of the crumbling walkway, staring up at the two-story colonial wedged between dunes like a forgotten postcard from 1967. It had green shutters and peeling white siding, and it looked like it had been holding its breath since Mom died. I hadn't been back to Seabridge in 15 years. Not since I was 12. Not since I woke up screaming from that dream, the one where I watched Mom walk into the ocean and never come back. She'd been sitting in her reading chair when I told her, eyes glinting with the afternoon light, and she whispered, "You'll understand when you're older." Well, I was older now. 30, divorced, laid off from my job at a graphic design firm. I had nowhere to be, and maybe that's what the house had been waiting for. Day 1. The paint peels in silence. The first day was quiet. That unnerving kind of quiet that stretches over everything like plastic wrap. I opened windows and let the salt air in, but the scent inside stayed the same, rosewater and dust. Mom's perfume, still lingering after all these years. The layout hadn't changed. The same yellow wallpaper in the hall, faded now. Same black and white photos on the walls, mostly of her, smiling at some invisible figure just out of frame. There were no mirrors, not a single one in the house. The back deck looked out onto the beach. That's where I found the first oddity. A wooden deck chair, just one, facing the water, perfectly centered. I sat in it, watching the surf roll in and out, hypnotic and slow. The ocean had that timeless pull, always familiar, always hiding something beneath. As the sun lowered, the shadows grew long, and I felt like something was approaching from the horizon. But nothing came. Still, I heard whispering that night. Not inside. Outside. Somewhere beyond the dunes. My name, carried on the wind. Elle. Day 2. Locked rooms and salt-stained pages. I explored more of the house the next morning. The upstairs guest room, the one my mother had always kept locked, was still sealed. But the key was in her jewelry box. A rusted brass thing that bit my hand as I turned it. Inside was a nursery, a full nursery, old, dusty, untouched for decades. A crib, a rocking chair, faded wallpaper with dancing sea creatures. My breath caught in my throat. I never had siblings. I asked once when I was a kid, and Mom had said, "Not everyone is meant to have more than one." There were no photos. No birth certificates, just a mobile hanging over the crib, seahorses and octopi swaying on threads, even though the windows were closed. In the closet I found a book, a diary, Mom's. The entries were scattered, the handwriting loose and frantic near the end. The ocean is not a place. It's a door. She came from it, and one day she'll go back. I hear her at night. She calls to Elle, but I won't let her in. One passage had a name scratched out, but beneath it I could barely make out the letters. Mara. I didn't know a Mara. That night, the deck chair was facing the house. I hadn't touched it. Day 3. Footsteps in the sand, and something else. I spent the day in town, trying to find anyone who remembered my mom. The locals were polite but distant. An old woman at the bait shop told me the house was a tide house. What's that mean? I asked. She just shook her head. Some places the ocean forgets. Some it remembers. And some it watches. I left with goosebumps and a bag of groceries I didn't remember picking out. Back at the house, I noticed something strange in the sand below the bluff. Footprints. Small. Child-sized. Leading from the shoreline up to the edge of the deck. And stopping. They weren't mine. I hadn't been down there since yesterday. I stayed up late, reading more of the diary. The name Mara kept appearing. She looks just like Elle did at 4. She asks to come inside, but I know better. She is not mine. She is not anyone's. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the baby monitor in the nursery turned on. I hadn't even known it was plugged in. A voice whispered, "Mama." I didn't sleep after that. Day 4. The beach takes and the beach returns. That morning I saw her. A little girl standing in the surf, just where the waves met the shore. She wore a seafoam dress and had dark hair matted against her cheeks. She stared up at the house, unmoving. I rushed down the stairs, ran across the sand, but by the time I reached the spot, she was gone.
No footprints.
No wet sand where she should have stood. When I came back inside, the nursery door was open again. The rocking chair was swaying. I called Aunt Patty in a panic, asking her if Mom had ever lost a child. She went quiet. "She lost something," she said. "Back in '89. I always figured it was a miscarriage. But after that, she was never the same." I asked her about Mara. Patty's breath caught. "You shouldn't say that name in the house." Then she hung up. That night I dreamed of water. Endless, churning water. And a girl beneath it, staring up through the surface. Reaching. I woke to find the deck chair in my room. Salt water pooled beneath it. Day 5. The truth under the floorboards. I tore the house apart, looking for anything, any clue. I found a loose board under the nursery crib. Beneath it, a box. Inside was a locket, corroded with rust. Inside the locket, a photo of my mother, and me, and another girl, same age, same hair. I touched the photo and the lights flickered. The mobile above the crib spun wildly. There was a note, too, in Mom's handwriting. "I couldn't let her take you both. I chose you." That night I heard footsteps, small, light, coming up the stairs. I locked the bedroom door. It rattled for a while, then stopped. When I opened my eyes, the girl was standing at the foot of the bed. She smiled. Salt water poured from her mouth. Final night. The mirror returns. I decided to leave. Packed everything by sunrise. But something in me, curiosity, guilt, fear, told me to do one last thing. I dug behind the drywall in Mom's old room. Found a mirror. Shattered. Buried. When I pulled it out and cleaned a shard, I saw her behind me. Mara. She looked just like me. No. She looked like what I would have been without love. Without safety. Without a life. She whispered, "You were supposed to stay." I threw the mirror into the surf and never looked back. Epilogue. A reflection in the waves. I live inland now, far from any water. But sometimes when I pass a mirror, especially when it's cracked, I see her, just for a second, smiling, waiting, because some beach houses aren't haunted by ghosts. They're haunted by choices, and the tide always remembers the ones we tried to bury. The house came as part of a deal. That's what the real estate agent told me when I signed the lease on the gallery space in town. "Beachfront cottage. Needs some TLC," she said, sliding the photo across the table. "Owner passed, no heirs. You'd be doing the place a favor." The rent was obscenely cheap, even for off-season. A 2-bedroom cottage perched at the edge of Bishop's Bay, maybe 30 feet from the surf. Weather-worn, sand-stained, and still full of furniture. But I didn't mind. I was a broke artist looking for a new start, and it felt poetic to sleep where I could hear the waves. There was no mention of the singing. Not at first. Day 1. The cottage by the bay. I moved in mid-February. The beach was deserted that time of year. Cold winds, rough surf, and gray skies that pressed down like a wet wool blanket. But the house had charm. Knotty pine walls, a wood-burning stove, seashells glued to the frames of every mirror, kitschy, but kinda sweet. It also had a smell. Not the mildew I expected, but something subtler. Like old perfume, faded lavender and salt? Not sea salt, more like brine. Sharp, almost metallic. The previous tenant had left behind a few things. Hand-painted shells in a bowl, a box of cassette tapes labeled in delicate script, Winter 1998, high tide songs, late nights, and a music box shaped like a lighthouse. When I turned the crank, it played something slow and haunting, a lullaby in a key I didn't recognize. I slept restlessly that first night, woke to a sound like humming, soft, melodic, a woman's voice, rising and falling beneath the howl of the wind. Day 2. The song at the shore. I asked around town the next morning. Bishop's Bay wasn't big. A diner, a tackle shop, and 3 art galleries, one of them mine now. The barista at the cafe, Maya, leaned in when I told her where I was staying. Old Wren's place, she said. She used to sing every night on that porch. Had a voice like nothing else. Said the ocean gave it to her. Wren? I asked. Wren Moore. She was a sculptor. Lived there alone for, 20 years, maybe? Some say she walked into the water one night and never came back. But nobody really knows. Did she drown? Maya shrugged. They never found her. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket and a glass of wine. The sea was louder than usual, slamming against the rocks in angry bursts. And then I heard it again. The voice, this time clearer. A low, mournful melody, wordless and full of ache. It came from the shoreline, but when I stood and squinted through the dark, there was no one there. I went inside, locked the door. The singing continued for another hour. Day 3. The shells move at night. I began finding them in odd places. Seashells. On the pillow next to me when I woke up. Inside my shoes. Balanced on the windowsill facing the ocean. Each one etched with tiny, perfect symbols. Not letters, more like runes. Spirals. Hooks. Crescents. I checked the ones in the bowl from the living room. Same markings. I couldn't explain how I hadn't noticed them before. That afternoon I played one of the tapes. The label said, Low Tide / March. It wasn't music. It was recordings. Of the ocean. Of footsteps on sand. Of Wren's voice. Low, breathy, whispering. She sings when she's lonely. She sings when she wants something. And she always wants something. Later that night, I heard whispering through the walls. Not singing. Words.
Come closer. Come listen.
Come under. I didn't sleep. Day 4. The brine in the pipes, the water turned to salt. Not metaphorically. Literally. When I turned on the tap, what came out was warm, brackish, and stung the cuts on my hands. The tub filled on its own. I came home from the gallery around 6 p.m. and found the bathroom steamed, floor slick, water running. No one had been there. I lived alone, but the water line in the tub was high, and floating in it was a single long braid of hair. Black,
Wet.
braided tight. I ran. Made it to the edge of town before I stopped shaking. Maya met me at the bar. Listened without judgment. I'll tell you what I heard, she said. Wren used to say the sea had a soul. Said it sang to her. Said it gave her visions. Visions? I asked. Faces in foam. Words in waves. She called it her muse. But I think it wanted more than art. Day 5. The song in my throat. I woke up choking. Not just dry throat, drowning. Gagging on nothing. Salt in my lungs. And I could still hear it. The melody. Now I knew the tune. I'd hummed it in my sleep. I'd sung it. I found my reflection distorted in the hallway mirror. Eyes darker. Mouth too wide. When I blinked, it was gone. But I knew then, Wren hadn't drowned. She'd changed. Transformed. Taken by whatever sang from beneath the waves. Final night. The chorus beneath the sand, the beach was lit by the moon. I walked barefoot, compelled, unable to stop. The sea called my name in a dozen different voices. When I reached the water, the tide receded, far more than it should have, exposing a hidden cove, jagged and slick with kelp. And in the center, a shape. A woman, skin like driftwood, hair black and coiled, shells embedded in her arms. Wren. She opened her mouth and sang, and I understood. She'd never left. She was the song. She had become part of whatever lived in the deep. And now it wanted me, too. I turned and ran. Never looked back. Epilogue. A voice in the gallery. I live in the city now. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear it again. That low melody. That call. Visitors to my gallery often say my sculptures seem to move, like they're breathing. One even said they heard them hum. I smiled and nodded, but I knew the truth. The sea gave me its voice, and one day it'll ask for it back. The beach house had been in our family for generations. Built in 1906, it stood at the very end of Driftwood Point, nestled between rocky outcrops and a half-moon bay where the tide rose so high in October that the sea foamed at the porch steps. My sister and I never wanted it. Too many memories, too many things left unsaid. But when Dad passed last spring and left the deed in both our names, Olivia insisted we at least go through it before selling. Give it a weekend, she said. One last look. We owe him that. We hadn't stepped foot in it since 2001, the summer our cousin Jonah disappeared. Day one, the house that waited the place looked the same, maybe worse. Sagging porch boards, glass panes fogged with sea grime, and a salt-bitten welcome sign that hung crooked on the screen door. Olivia unlocked it, and I held my breath as we stepped inside. Musty, faintly sour, like old wood and something that had been damp too long. Everything was covered in sheets. Every single item, the chairs, the mirrors, the wall art, even the piano in the den. But the weirdest part? There were 3 coffee mugs on the kitchen counter, still full. The mold crust suggested they'd been there for years, at least a decade. But they weren't ours. One had a chipped blue rim. One said #OneGrandpa. And one was plain white, cracked down the middle. We didn't touch them. We didn't say a word. That night, we slept in the upstairs rooms with the windows cracked. The wind howled. The waves pounded. And I swear, at around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps pacing the hallway. Not Olivia's. Too heavy. Too slow. Day 2. The locked door at the end of the hall the next morning. I found Olivia staring at the far end of the upstairs hallway. Wasn't there a bathroom there? She asked. I thought back. There had been. I remembered brushing my teeth in it. But now it was just a door, locked from the inside. We tried everything. Keys, butter knives, even a coat hanger. It wouldn't budge. Later that afternoon, while sorting through boxes in the attic, I found an old photo album. Pages yellowed, sticky. Our family in black swimsuits and sun hats. Dad, uncharacteristically smiling. Uncle Harold drinking a can of Miller Lite. And Jonah. On the last page was a Polaroid I'd never seen. Jonah standing on the porch. In the background, through the open door, was a face in the shadows. Not one of ours. Pale. Slanted. Watching. Olivia and I stared at it for a long time without speaking. That night, the locked door rattled. We both heard it. Day 3. The guest room that wasn't there. We planned to leave that morning. Sell the place sight unseen. Get out while we still could. But when I came downstairs, Olivia was gone. Not in the kitchen. Not on the porch. Not at the shoreline. I called her phone. No answer. Hours passed. Then I noticed something new. A door off the main hallway that hadn't been there before. It led to a room we didn't remember, small, narrow, with a single bed and a sea chest at the foot. On the nightstand was Olivia's phone, open, battery dead, and on the bed was a note written in her handwriting. He never left. You knew that. We both did. The house didn't forget him. And now it wants to remember through me. I backed out, ran to the car, but the tires were slashed. Every window fogged from the inside. That night, I sat on the couch holding a fire poker. And just before dawn, I saw Olivia standing on the bluff, smiling, eyes completely white. Final day. The room at the end of the hall opens. I tried to leave again. Called for help. No signal. Every mirror showed my face out of sync. Blinking when I didn't, mouth twitching in ways that didn't match. And then I heard the lock click upstairs. The door at the end of the hall had opened. Inside was a room with no windows.
No lights.
Only a chair in the middle and hundreds of Polaroids pinned to the walls. All of Olivia. Each one a little different. A little more wrong. Until the last showed her floating in the tide. Eyes wide. Mouth open. Hair fanned like seaweed. I ran. Sprinted down the stairs, out the back door. The ocean waited. And in the waves I saw her. Arms outstretched. Mouthing words I couldn't hear. Something in me broke. And I stepped forward. Epilogue. The house has 3 cups again. They found the house abandoned 3 months later. 2 cups on the counter, full of black water. A third, white, cracked, had been added. And the door at the end of the hall? Gone. Replaced by a blank stretch of wall. But at night, locals say, they still hear footsteps from the upper floor. And sometimes, if the wind blows just right, 2 voices can be heard in the surf. Calling for Jonah. Calling for you. There's an abandoned house that moves with the sea. Not metaphorically, not some crumbling old cottage on shifting sand dunes. I mean, it moves. Every few years, it shows up somewhere new along the eastern coast. Not just eroded or collapsed. The entire thing reappears whole and intact, as if placed there overnight. No foundation, no path to the door. Just there. Locals call it the Drift House. And when I stumbled across it in the spring of 2019, I made the mistake of going inside. Day 1. The wrong beach. I was hiking along a rarely used coastal trail just north of Montauk. I'd been laid off a month earlier, needed space to think, and the cliffs above the Atlantic always cleared my head. But that day the fog was thick, so thick I lost the trail. I descended the wrong bluff, thinking I could find my way back up along the beach. That's when I saw it. Nestled in a cove I swore hadn't been there the week before. A 2-story Victorian beach house. Ivory wood. Green shutters. A wraparound porch. Clean. Untouched. No sign of weather damage or even footprints in the sand. It didn't make sense. There were no roads.
No driveways. No tire marks.
Just cliffs behind and waves ahead. Yet there it stood. And the front door was slightly open. Curiosity, as it often does, overrode caution. Inside. The house is waiting. The interior was dry. Warm. Too warm, considering it was 50 degrees outside. There was furniture, wallpaper, an upright piano in the corner. The walls held framed photos of strangers. Families smiling stiffly, eyes cloudy from age or overexposure. But none of the photos looked modern. Most were sepia-toned. Some even older, daguerreotypes, the kind where no one smiles. A grandfather clock ticked softly in the corner, even though its hands never moved. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon. The sink was full of seawater. There was a journal on the coffee table. The front read, Visitors, Year 68. I opened it. Each page was an entry. Just a date, a name, and a message. Some cheerful, some apologetic. One read, I thought it was a gift. Now I know it's a prison. Lily Y. 1983. Another. The house is kindest to the lonely. Jonas K. 1914, and then it came to me in Maine. I made it one night. Now it won't let me go. The most recent entry was dated 4 days ago. I saw my sister in the mirror. She drowned in 1997. SM. I closed the book. Outside, the tide had come in. The cove was gone. The beach, submerged. Day 2. The uninvited hosts. I woke on the couch. I don't remember falling asleep. There was no clock, but the light outside was dim, foggy again. Someone had placed a tray on the coffee table. A cup of tea, still warm. A biscuit. There were footprints now. Small, bare feet leading from the back hallway to the stairs. I followed them. The upstairs had 5 doors. Only one was open. Inside was a child's room. Antique toys. A rocking horse that swayed gently, though no windows were open. On the wall above the bed were names carved into the wood. Grace. Pale. Ivy.
Sam.
Ellie. Jonah. Lily. Harper. Miles. Mine wasn't there. Yet, that night, I heard voices beneath the floor. Whispers. Rhythmic, like chanting. Day 3. The mirror room. On the 3rd day, I found the mirror room. It was behind a door that hadn't been there yesterday. The walls were lined with mirrors, each one cracked slightly, but not shattered. In each, I saw a different version of myself. In one, I was old and gaunt. In another, drenched and bloated, skin tinged blue. In the largest mirror, I saw myself as a child, and standing behind me, someone else. A woman, tall, hair like kelp, eyes black, mouth thin and stitched. She raised a hand and pointed to my reflection. "Stay," she said. "Stay." They all echoed. I ran, slammed the door. The mirror behind me cracked. My reflection didn't. Day 4. The house moves. I tried to leave. Found the cove had shifted again. Now the house sat on stilts, just above the surf. There were no cliffs, no forest. Only sea, endless in every direction. Like the house had drifted miles while I slept. That night, I wrote in the journal, "If you're reading this, the house is not a place. It's a current. Defines those it wants and carries them. I don't know where it's going, but it's taking me." I signed my name, left the book open, slept with the lights on, heard footsteps above the ceiling. There was no attic. Final day. The tide comes inward. I woke to water in the hallway. Salt water, ankle deep. Fish swam between the floorboards. The ceiling bulged and groaned like it was underwater. Every room now connected by thin streams of rising tide. And I knew this was how it took them. Not all at once, but slow, like erosion. I climbed to the roof with the journal, screamed at the gray sky, cried until I saw movement far in the fog. Another shore, another coastline, another victim. The house had arrived. Epilogue. Found journal. No house. A park ranger in Bar Harbor, Maine, found the journal. It lay open on the sand. No house nearby. Only the indentation of stilts. Only the sound of waves retreating. And one final entry in a new hand. "She took me in. I won't leave now. I belong here." They tried to trace the handwriting. They couldn't. But a week later, a similar house appeared near Cape Hatteras. And someone else went missing. The drift house moves on. It always finds the lonely. It always sings with the tide. There are some things you inherit that you never wanted, like old tax debt, antique furniture that reeks of mothballs, or, in my case, a beach house from a father I barely knew. My dad, Gregory Lane, died last year from what the coroner listed as a self-inflicted fall. I didn't even know he still owned property, let alone a 2-bedroom beach house in Devil's Rest Cove, a narrow strip of New Jersey coastline not found on most maps. The deed arrived in a thick, yellowed envelope with a single note written in his shaky hand. "If you go, bring salt, and never stay past the sixth scream. It would have been easy to ignore, but I didn't. Day 1. Devil's Rest. The beach house sat at the end of a broken shell path, the sand almost swallowing the front steps. Weather-beaten and leaning slightly left, it looked like a house that had been trying to fall down for decades but never got around to it. Inside, it was surprisingly intact. Dusty, yes. Damp, definitely. But every lamp worked. Every chair sat right where it belonged, pointed toward a wide, foggy bay that boiled with waves. There was a large hatch in the living room floor, bolted shut with 6 iron locks. My dad's journal lay on the mantel. The first page read, "The boards aren't rotten. They're holding her in." That night, I heard the first scream. It came at 1:06 a.m. high, piercing, childlike, from directly beneath the floor. Day 2. The locked hatch. I should have left. But I didn't. I chalked the scream up to a bird or a seal, anything but what it sounded like. I spent the day exploring. Every room held something off. Family photos with the faces scratched out, curtains that seemed to twist inward when the wind blew, and salt patterns drawn on every window. Warding sigils, I would later learn. In the upstairs closet, I found a small jar of coarse sea salt and a note taped to the inside wall. Ring the hatch after each scream. For corners. Salt afterward. At 12:55 a.m., I waited. The second scream came at 1:07 a.m. This time it was angrier, more human. I sprinkled salt in a ring around the hatch and tapped each corner. The screaming stopped instantly, and I swear something shifted beneath the boards, like a body turning over in its sleep. Day 3. Letters from the dead. That morning, I found letters slipped under the door, all addressed to Gregory Lane, all dated after his death. One read, "She wants a voice again. She says the sea took her tongue, but the boards hold her words." Another, "You promised her 6. There have only been 5. The third was blank, except for the word, "run," scribbled in red ink. I spent hours Googling Devil's Rest. Barely anything came up. A couple of ghost forums mentioned the woman under the boards, mostly urban legend stuff. A woman who drowned after being locked in a cellar during a flood, her voice stolen by saltwater spirits. No real names, no details, no warnings about how loud she gets. That night, the third scream came at 1:08 a.m. longer, desperate, and directly beneath my feet. Day 4. She knows my name. The dream came first. I was underwater, not drowning, suspended, floating alongside a pale woman with open eyes and blackened lips, her hair fanned like ink in water. She mouthed something over and over. "Not mine, not yours. Ode." I woke to find the salt ring disturbed, lines smudged, gaps in the corners, like someone had crawled through it. The journal now lay open to the final entry. "She came early last time, broke through on scream 5, took my brother, left his face in the mirror." The scream that night didn't come at 1:09, came at midnight, and it wasn't a scream. It was my name, spoken in a voice I hadn't heard since childhood. My mother's, even though she died when I was 6. Day 5. The 5th, I sealed the hatch with duct tape. Chairs, furniture, anything I could move. Didn't matter. When the 5th scream came, every window shattered. Every door swung open, and water began to rise from the cracks in the floor. Not seeping, pouring. Thick, dark, stinking of rot. The water never reached higher than my ankles. But in it I saw shapes. Hands. Faces. Pressing up from beneath like swimmers trapped beneath ice. I screamed back. The water receded, but a single wet handprint remained on the inside of the front door. Final night. The 6th scream. I packed to leave. Screw the deed. Screw the house. But my car wouldn't start. The tires had melted. Yes, melted. Rubber puddled around the rims. Inside, the house creaked, moaned, and the hatch began to breathe. No, I don't know how else to explain it. It rose and fell like lungs. Then the locks popped one by one, quiet little clicks. I heard her below, speaking now. You never rang the bell. You never paid the salt. You never listened. At 1:10 a.m., the sixth scream came. Not high, not sharp. A deep, guttural cry that split the ceiling. The boards peeled like skin, and she crawled out, a woman made of brine and broken wood. Her mouth a maw of splinters, her eyes hollow. She said one word, "Stay." I passed out before she reached me. Epilogue. A house on the market when they found me. I was in the dunes, catatonic, barefoot and salt-burned. No sign of the house, no path,
no hatch.
But they found a jar of salt in my pocket and my father's journal clutched in my hand. The last page had changed. Now it said, "The seventh scream will be yours. I've moved 5 states inland."
No mirrors. No floorboards.
No water. But sometimes, when I lie awake at night, I hear wood creak, and something ringing in the dark, waiting for my turn to scream. In my final year of architecture school, I took an internship in a remote coastal village called Greyhook. It was the kind of place where the wind never stopped howling and the locals never stopped watching you from behind lace curtains. The firm set me up in a cottage just off the beach, half sunken into the dune line. It was modest. 2 bedrooms, a galley kitchen, and a strange little sunroom built entirely of glass. The real estate agent handed me the keys with a shrug. The locals call that room the Eye. Always faces the sea, even when the tide moves. I thought it was a metaphor. I learned later it wasn't. Day 1. The Eye opens. The first thing I noticed was that the sunroom didn't match the rest of the house. Its foundation was newer, materials mismatched, beams reinforced like a bunker. It always felt colder in there. And no matter what time of day, the windows never reflected anything. They absorbed light, sucked it in like open mouths. I took a few photos for reference, planning to sketch the layout later, but each one came out distorted. The angles seemed to shift. The glass glared back with a haze I couldn't wipe clean. That night, I lay awake listening to the surf. At exactly 3:12 a.m., every window in the sunroom fogged from the outside, and something tapped once, just once, from the inside. Day 2. The village knows at the general store I tried asking about the house. The clerk, a man with wind-chapped skin and one milky eye, froze when I mentioned the sunroom. "Best not to look too long," he said. "She notices." "Who?" He only shook his head. I found a local archive in the town hall, and in it, a clipping from 1969. Storm claims widow's cottage, only room left standing. Glass edition survives surge. There was a photo. Same cottage. Same sunroom. Only then it was alone. The rest of the house had been swept away. The widow's name was Clara Haynes. Drowned. No body recovered. That night, I returned to the house and stood in the sunroom for an hour. The tide was low. The moon hung like a coin. Then I saw a face in the window, not a reflection, just a face, pressed to the glass from the inside. Day 3. The room rearranges the next morning. I found the sunroom had changed orientation. The whole room, where it once faced the open ocean, it now pointed northeast, toward a stretch of cliffs called Widow's Leap. I hadn't moved it. No construction tools. No foundation jacks. Nothing could explain it. The floor tiles had changed, too, arranged in a spiral pattern I didn't remember seeing before. And something else. My sketches of the room, the ones I'd done on night 1, were all smudged, like someone had dragged a wet finger through the ink. I checked my laptop camera footage. At 3:12 a.m., the sunroom filled with fog, and something passed across the screen, long-limbed, dragging one hand along the glass. Day 4. The sleepwalker. I woke up in the sunroom, fully clothed, standing, hands against the cold pane. I hadn't gone to bed there. I hadn't meant to. The tide was high and angry, the waves pounding so close it felt like the house would be carried away. But the sunroom didn't shake. Not even a creak. I opened my hand and found a shard of sea glass embedded in my palm. Deep, and I didn't flinch. Didn't feel it. The floor tiles pulsed faintly beneath my feet. Later that day, I called the firm and told them I needed to cut the internship short. I'd leave tomorrow. That night, the wind whispered my name from inside the room. Day 5. Clara's chair. I packed my things at dawn. Avoided the sunroom, but the exit was blocked. The front door stood open, filled with sand. The windows were bricked with fog. Only one path remained through the eye, through the room that faced the sea. I entered, and it was no longer a sunroom. It was a chapel, or something like it. The walls dripped salt. The floor was submerged in inches of tidewater. At the far end sat a high-backed chair, and in it a woman, draped in seaweed, skin pale and bloated, eyes glassy and full of tide. She didn't speak, but her voice filled the room. You saw me. You knew me. Now you stay. The windows closed like shutters. The water rose. I turned and smashed my way out through the back door, tearing flesh on broken glass. The house screamed behind me. Epilogue. The room always faces the firm never found the house again. Storms came and went, reshaped the beach. Locals say the eye still turns. It faces the ocean, then the cliffs. Then sometimes it faces inward, toward your room. If you ever wake to find a sunroom where there wasn't one before, do not enter after dark. Do not touch the windows, and never look too long, because she notices, and the eye always opens. You ever have a place you just feel was waiting for you? That's how it was with the Marshlight Beach rental. I found it on an obscure listing site that barely worked on mobile. No map, no reviews, just 3 faded pictures of a small gray cottage beside windswept dunes and an asking price so low I thought it was a scam. But something about it tugged at me, like deja vu wrapped in brine. So I booked it for 2 weeks, off-season, alone. And from the first moment I stepped onto that porch, I realized the house hadn't just been waiting for anyone. It had been waiting for me. Day 1. The footprints in the sand. I arrived at dusk. The sun a bleeding orange smear behind the dunes. The sea churning like it was hiding secrets. The house was humble. Sloped roof, peeling paint, and a crooked weather vane shaped like a crow. Inside, sparse furniture, a fireplace full of cold ash, and a single hallway lined with framed photos. The photos were odd. Each showed the same woman, always standing on the dunes, always turned just slightly away, like she almost didn't want to be seen. I checked the kitchen. Everything smelled like seaweed and lemon oil. The fridge was off, but the lights worked. The only sound was the wind and the creak of old boards. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard soft thumping from the porch. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. I peeked out the window. No one. But the next morning, the sand at the base of the porch steps was marked with barefoot prints. Small, feminine, and facing toward the house. Day 2. The Journal of the Unnamed. I found it in the nightstand drawer. A weathered leather journal, its pages stiff with salt and time. There was no name on the cover. The first entry was dated 10 years ago. The wind calls her. She stands by the dunes every dusk, waiting, watching. She wants someone to remember her. More entries followed, each describing odd sounds, missing time, and dreams of drowning. One passage stopped me cold. She said my name last night, whispered it from the dunes. I never told her my name. That afternoon, I walked the beach. Miles of untouched sand. Not a soul in sight. But at the edge of the dunes, where the grasses grew tall and tangled. I saw her, the woman from the photos. Same black dress, same turned shoulder. When I blinked, she was gone. But in the sand where she stood was a handprint, palm down, like she'd risen from beneath. Day 3. The door that shouldn't open, I woke to cold air. The front door was open, not just ajar, wide open, wind whipping through the screen, leaves and grit scattered across the floor. I checked every window, locked. Only the front door was unsecured, and beside it, in the threshold, lay a necklace. Old, silver. The pendant was a black pearl wrapped in wire, warm to the touch despite the cold. I didn't recognize it. I didn't own it, but it felt familiar. I put it on. The dreams that night were violent, dark waves crashing over my face, the woman straddling my chest, whispering, "You're finally back." Day 4. The family portrait, I found it behind a false panel in the hallway. A long, dust-caked photo of a family standing on the same dunes. Father, mother, daughter. The daughter's face had been scratched out, so had the nameplate at the bottom. But the woman, the mother, was unmistakable. The same woman from the earlier photos. From the dunes. Only now she was smiling. Barely. Her eyes were pale, almost gray. And behind her, in the faintest blur of the background, was a fourth figure. A silhouette. Tall. Thin. Not part of the family. Day 5. She calls me by my name, she called it through the vents. Through the walls. Through the waves. My name. Over and over. Soft. Sing-song. Patient. Matthew? I hadn't told anyone I was staying here. Hadn't posted. But she knew. I checked the journal again. The final page had changed. A new entry had appeared in my own handwriting. She's found me again. I always come back. I always forget. But this time, I'll remember. I dropped the journal and ran. Packed my things. Threw them in the car. The engine wouldn't start. The air outside thickened like syrup. The wind stopped completely. And the dunes rustled with something more than grass. Final night. The return, I sat in the center of the living room. All lights on. The fire roaring despite no wood. The necklace burning against my chest. She came at 3:33 a.m. Through the open door. She glided.
No footprints. No breath.
Her dress trailing seafoam. Her fingers tipped in black. She reached for me and spoke. Not aloud, but in my bones. You left me. Again. You promised. You were mine. She touched my forehead. And I remembered. All of it. I'd lived here before. A different name. A different life. I built this house for her. I drowned her in those dunes. I buried the memory. Until now. Epilogue. The listing, the rental, was pulled from the site last month. Too many disappearances. Too many whispers. Locals say if you walk the dunes at dusk, you can hear her calling a name. It changes. Sometimes male. Sometimes female. Sometimes yours. And if you find a necklace in the sand, don't pick it up. It means you're already home. It means she remembers you. Every beach town has its forgotten stretch, the place the tourists avoid, where the sand turns gray and the birds stop singing. In Fair Harbor, Maine, that place was Crow's Hollow, a ragged inlet flanked by black rocks and a defunct lighthouse. The locals said it was where the tide went to die, where things washed in but never washed out. The house there, a skeletal Victorian with crow-shaped weather vanes on every peak, had been vacant for decades, until my brother Peter bought it on a dare from some Urban Explorer message board. I told him not to go. When he stopped answering texts, I drove out to find him. Day 1. The house in the hollow Crow's Hollow looked even worse in person. The sand was ashen, littered with sea glass and driftwood tangled like ribs. The house sat hunched over the cove, shutters flapping in the sea wind, door hanging open like a slack mouth. Peter's Jeep was in the overgrown lot, its hood coated in briny grit. Inside the house was cold. Not breezy, cold, like a tomb. It smelled like salt and burnt sugar. His things were scattered around the entry hall. A camera bag, a notebook, half a sandwich fossilized on the counter. But no Peter, just silence, and the rhythmic thudding of waves against the stilts. That night, I found his journal open in the upstairs bedroom. The final entry read, "Low tide reveals the door. I saw her watching. Her eyes are full of tide. She waits. Day 2. The voice in the floor I stayed against my better judgment. I told myself I needed to find answers, but the house had other plans. That morning, I heard someone whisper my name from the living room. Lena. It wasn't Peter's voice. It was older.
Vet.
The floorboards near the hearth were swollen, warped into a ring. I tried to pry them up but stopped when I heard scratching underneath. That night I dreamed of Peter. He stood at the edge of the water, pale, eyes gone, mouth stuffed with kelp. He raised a finger and pointed at the rocks. "It opens at low tide," he rasped. "But only if you watch her first." Day 3. The woman in the rock pool. Low tide came at 3:48 p.m. I followed the shoreline, past Titapools slick with barnacles and bits of crab shell. That's when I saw her. A woman, naked, hair like black moss, lying motionless in a shallow rock basin. I thought she was dead, until her eyes snapped open. Black, deep, wrong. She didn't move. She just stared. And beneath her body, the pool began to boil. I ran back to the house, slid the bolts shut. Later, I checked the camera Peter left behind. Every image was blurry except one. A photo of her standing in the doorway of the house, mouth open wide enough to swallow the lens. Day 4. The door under the house. I couldn't stop myself. Something drew me under the house that evening. A hatch beneath the porch, locked with rusted chains, all broken now. Inside was a narrow staircase that led straight into sand. The walls wept with salt. The air was too still. I found bones there, dozens. Some animal, some not. Each one had carvings, spirals, arrows, and a shape like a crown made of waves. At the end was a door, smooth, white, and warm, pulsed with each wave outside. I pressed my hand to it. Something pressed back. That night, the woman appeared at the foot of my bed. She whispered, "Now we remember you." Day 5. The return. Peter returned on the 5th day. Kind of. He knocked once on the door, stood there dripping, hair crusted with sand, eyes dull as driftwood. He didn't speak, just opened his mouth and a voice, not his, came out. "One must stay." Then he collapsed. His body dissolved into black water that soaked into the floor. The next morning, I found a new entry in his notebook. In my handwriting. "The tide has a memory, the hollow a hunger. I stayed too long. I became part of the shore. I packed to leave, but the car wouldn't start, and the crows began to gather on the roof. Final night. The hollow calls the house groaned with the tide. Every wall warped inward like breath. I stood at the door to the cellar. The sand whispered, "Come back down." I descended barefoot. The white door glowed, and opened on its own. Inside was not a room. It was ocean. Endless, roaring, inverted like a sky made of drowning. And from it rose her, the woman, now taller than the house. Her hair a net of shadows. Her hands empty, but waiting. "One must stay," she said again. "And now it's your turn." Epilogue. Crow's Hollow remains. The house is still there. Locals avoid it. Say it sings during storms. That sometimes, if the tide is low and the moon just right, you can see a woman walking the shallows, dragging someone by the hand, and behind her a door made of bone, waiting. You grow up in a place like Coral Hook, and you learn not to ask questions. You don't ask why the beach is always closed at night, even when the weather's perfect. You don't ask why the lifeguard chairs face away from the ocean. And you especially don't ask why every house leaves a bowl of fresh water by the back door during high tide. It's just tradition, people say. But I left Coral Hook at 18 and never looked back. That is, until my mother died and left me her house on Tideglass Lane. I didn't plan on staying long, just long enough to clean it out and put it on the market. But the beach had been waiting, and so had he. Day 1. The bowl on the porch of the house was just as I remembered: seafoam shutters, warped porch steps, and wind chimes made from old keys and shells. But one thing was new: a ceramic bowl on the back porch, full of water. I figured a neighbor had left it, but when I asked around, people just looked at me strange. "You forgot the rules already?" said old Mrs. Henders from across the street. "You were lucky once. You may not be twice." She wouldn't explain. That night, I tossed the water into the garden, left the bowl upside down. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up coughing. My mouth was full of sand. Day 2. The mark in the mirror, I thought it was a dream, until I saw the trail. Thin streaks of sand leading from the back door through the kitchen, up the stairs and into my bedroom. They stopped at the foot of my bed. And on the mirror, drawn in wet sand, was a shape, a crescent moon above a slitted eye. I cleaned it off, heart hammering, and checked the locks. All bolted. The bowl on the porch was full again. I hadn't touched it, and as I stared out at the beach, I saw a figure standing by the dunes, watching. Day 3. The return of the Sandman. I asked the librarian about the symbol. She turned pale when I sketched it. "That's his mark," she whispered. "The Sandman of Coral Hook." "A story," she said. "Local myth. A being that rose from the tide when the moon was lowest. That walked the shore collecting memories, and sometimes people. They said he was made of ground bone and salt. They said he whispered your name into your sleep, and if you responded, he took your breath. No one had seen him in years, but he always came back when someone broke the water offering." Day 4. The sand beneath the skin. The itching started that morning. Along my arms, my scalp, my gums. I looked in the mirror and nearly screamed. Tiny grains of sand were embedded in my skin, like splinters, pushing outward. I tried to wash them off, but more came. They poured from the faucet, fell from the ceiling, and then, from inside the walls, came a soft voice. "You left, but I never stopped watching. You owe me one sleep." That night, I dreamed I was buried to my neck in the beach, and something slowly covered my face with sand. Day 5. The window in the tide. I found it just after dawn. A tidal near the rocks, flat, circular, still, and in it, a reflection that wasn't mine. A window showing the interior of my bedroom, but twisted. The bed was made of seaweed. The wallpaper pulsed, and standing in the corner was the Sandman. Tall, faceless, grains swirling where his skin should be. He raised a finger and pointed, not at the room, but at me. The reflection shattered, and the tidal drained into the sand. Final night. One sleep owed. I tried to flee, packed my bags, ran for the car, but every road led back to the house, every turn a loop. By midnight, the bowl had filled again. The water shimmered red in the moonlight, and the front door opened on its own. I felt him enter before I saw him. The air thickened, my lungs tightened, the mirror fogged, and there he stood, not in flesh but in form, a shifting outline of dunes and despair. He laid a finger to my lips. "Sleep," he whispered. "Just one." I collapsed before I hit the floor. Epilogue. The house on Tideglass Lane. I woke a week later, in the hospital, found by hikers who claimed my house was boarded shut, windows black. No signs of entry, but the bowl on the porch was shattered. and my body was covered in bruises shaped like grains. I moved inland, but I don't sleep much anymore, because he said one, and that means he'll be back for another. Maybe yours, maybe mine, when the tide is lowest, and the sand starts whispering. The beach house came with a lighthouse. That should have been a red flag right there. I inherited the property from my Uncle Darren, a crusty old sailor who spent the last 20 years of his life alone on a narrow spit of land called Gullbone Point. The only way in was via an old wooden bridge that disappeared at high tide. The house itself was fine, weathered but sturdy, with briny air creeping in through every crack. But it was the lighthouse, perched 50 yards from the back porch, that caught the eye. It wasn't on any current coastal maps, wasn't even connected to the grid, and yet, every night it lit up, by itself. Day 1. The light turns on. I arrived just before sunset. The bridge creaked behind me as the tide rolled in, cutting off the road. I unpacked, cracked a beer, and stood on the porch watching the waves. That's when I saw it. The lantern room in the lighthouse flickered, then flared to life. A pale, blue-white glow, steady and cold. I knew for a fact no one had been maintaining the structure. Darren hadn't left instructions. There were no keys.
No generator.
But still the light burned. I figured maybe it was residual power, old backup battery systems, or some local prankster messing with me. That night, I dreamt I was walking the spiral staircase inside it, up and up and up, but it never ended, just winding steel and whispers. When I woke, my feet were dusty, with white paint flakes. Day 2. The widow's logbook. I found it in a chest beneath the stairs in the house. A leather-bound logbook, water-stained, brittle, but mostly legible. The entries dated back to 1894. Signed by someone calling herself E. Mather, Widowkeeper. The lighthouse, it turns out, had a unique purpose. It does not warn ships, she wrote. It calls them. The light is a lure, not a signal. And once they come, they never leave. Most entries were mundane, weather notes, tide cycles, but scattered among them were warnings. I hear them below. The drowned men, scraping the stone. The light comes on when it's hungry. I cannot leave. The bridge goes, but the light stays. It must always be watched. The sea forgets everything but her dead. The last entry was dated October 3rd, 1913. Someone has to stay, even if it's only me. Day 3. The woman in the glass. I decided to explore the lighthouse. I waited until mid-morning and crossed the overgrown path to its rusted door. It was unlocked. The smell hit me first. Old seawater, hot metal, and something sweet and wrong. Inside was pitch black until I flicked on my flashlight. The stairs spiraled up into darkness. Every footstep echoed, not just ahead, but behind me too, like something was one step behind, mimicking. Halfway up, I passed a window slit and saw her, a pale woman in black, walking the beach toward the house. But when I turned around, no one. I raced to the top. The lantern room was empty, but there was a mirror, oval-shaped, sea-streaked, and in it my reflection didn't move. Instead, it smiled, and its eyes turned black. Day 4. The bridge is gone. The tide never went back out. It rose and stayed. The bridge was submerged now, and when I tried calling for help, no service. The light came on again at 7:03 p.m. sharp.
No noise. No mechanism.
Just sudden illumination that painted the entire landscape in that icy glow. And the light turned, slowly, scanning the water, looking. That night I saw figures on the beach. Men, dripping, swollen, hollow-eyed, marching in lockstep toward the house. Each time the beam passed, they froze. When it swept away, they moved again. I barred the doors, slept with a hammer, Prayed for low tide. Day 5. The keeper's price, I made it through the night. But just barely. The men didn't break in, not fully. But one of them pressed his face to the living room window for hours. When the beam hit him, he snarled like a cornered dog. The journal had one final page I hadn't seen before, folded under the back cover. If you stay 5 nights, you become the keeper. If the light goes out, they come in. If you leave, they follow, until you bring the light back. There was a name beneath it. My uncle's. And now, beneath his name, mine. Newly written. Final night. The choice the 6th night. The light didn't come on. I stood on the porch holding a flare. The sea churned. The bridge remained hidden. And the drowned men rose from the surf, eyes locked on me. Then I heard her voice, the woman in black, soft, from the tower. Turn the light back on, Matthew, or let them in. One always stays. I ran, climbed the spiral stairs 2 at a time, reached the lantern room, found a single switch, red. Vet. I hesitated. The dead were at the door now, scraping, moaning. I flipped it. The light roared to life. The dead stopped, and turned, and walked slowly back into the tide. Epilogue. The new keeper, I'm still here, still watching. The light comes on at 7:03 every night, and goes out at 6:12 a.m. I don't sleep much, but they don't come anymore, because they know the light is watching, because now I am the light's keeper, and when I'm gone, it'll choose someone else, maybe you. If you ever find a house with a lighthouse out back, run, before the beam finds you. The cottage came with a warning, not from the landlord, but from a little girl who appeared on my 2nd night there. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I booked the place through an obscure vacation rental site that promised privacy, sunsets, and uninterrupted ocean views. What I got was a leaning, shingle-gray shack on the edge of a jagged shoreline near Penobscot Bay.
No neighbors. No Wi-Fi.
No phone signal after 8 p.m. Just the sound of wind and waves and gulls that never stopped circling. And the glint of sea glass everywhere. So much that it covered the ground like confetti. I should have known something was wrong. But she was already waiting. Day 1. The girl in the tide pool. I spent the first day unpacking and walking the rocky beach behind the cottage. It was strange. Miles of tide pools, but not a single shell or crab in sight. Only glass. Blue, green, red. Scattered like gems, all frosted and smooth. At the largest pool, I saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8. Long hair matted to her cheeks, dress soaked, barefoot. She didn't say anything, just pointed at a pile of white stones beside the water, then vanished behind the rocks. I called out, searched, nothing. When I returned to the house, I found a single piece of sea glass on the porch railing, shaped like an eye. Day 2. The stories carved in glass that morning. I discovered something odd. The glass wasn't just glass. When held to the sun, each piece had something etched inside it. Microscopic, perfect. I found faces, symbols. Once, I swore I saw a full scene. A child on a dock, falling backward, mouth open in a scream. I collected as much as I could and spread it out on the kitchen table. A mosaic began to form, not of art, but of warnings. Each shard a piece of a larger message. That night, the girl returned. She stood at the edge of the yard, lit by moonlight, her lips moving silently. When I stepped outside, she was gone. But the word listen was written in sand at my feet. Day 3. The ticking below it started after midnight. A soft ticking like a watch or metronome, coming from under the floorboards. I lifted the carpet. Nothing. The ticking grew louder, faster, until suddenly it stopped, and the cottage shuddered once, like something had slammed into its foundation from beneath. Outside, the wind had stopped. but the gulls were screaming. All of them, in unison. I covered the windows, and in the flickering candlelight, I saw my reflection in the glass mosaic on the table. But it wasn't my face. It was hers. Day 4. The other side of the pool, I went back to the large tide pool. This time I brought gloves, a notebook, and a camera. I took a dozen photos of the rocks. None of them developed. Only a blank gray film and one image of the girl. Closer now, expression twisted. Her eyes were glass. Her hands too long, fused with coral and bone. And when I peered into the pool, I saw no reflection. Only a spiraling tunnel descending into black water. Shapes moved in it. Children, I think. Or what used to be. And from below, a voice whispered, "She takes what's lost. She keeps them in the glass." Day 5. The offering, the front door was open when I woke. A neat stack of sea glass rested on the porch, formed into the shape of a child curled in sleep. Beneath it, one of my baby teeth, from the box I kept in my suitcase. I never told anyone about it. I confronted the beach, yelling, demanding, begging. The wind picked up. Glass whipped against the house like hail. And inside the tide pool, a figure emerged. The girl, or something wearing her. She held out her arms and whispered, "One must stay. One must sleep, or all will drown." I fled, back to the cottage, packed what I could, waited for morning. Final night. Glass in the walls, the house groaned all night. Glass popped out of the walls, the floor, the ceiling, growing, spreading. Each shard reflected a different scene. A child weeping under the waves. A mother's mouth open in a scream. My own face, buried in sand. I couldn't escape. Every window showed ocean now, even ones that faced inland. I locked myself in the bathroom, closed my eyes, waited. When I opened them again, the girl stood in the tub, mouth sewn shut, hands outstretched, and then nothing. Epilogue. Visitors at low tide locals say no one's lived in the Seaglass cottage for years, but sometimes hikers see a child near the rocks, alone, waving, and if you follow her, she'll lead you to a pool, where your reflection won't look back, and the tide never recedes. There's a place near Kill Devil Shoals, North Carolina, where the dunes don't shift. They're permanent, unmoving, strange, considering the wind that rakes the outer banks constantly reshapes every other grain of shoreline. Locals call it the Still Bend. No animals nest there, no plants grow, but in the right light, just as the sun sets behind the sea, you can see something beneath the sand, corners, shadows, sloped outlines. A house, buried, and if you listen closely, you can hear it breathe. Day 1. The knock beneath my feet. I wasn't supposed to be near the Still Bend. I'd rented a beach cabin about half a mile up the coast, hoping for quiet after a nasty divorce and a slow-burning mental breakdown. I wanted nothing but sun, solitude, and silence. On my first night, I heard knocking. 3 sharp thuds. Not from the front door, from below. The floorboards vibrated. It was almost polite, like someone asking to be let up. I chalked it up to shifting sand or a warped foundation. But at 3:03 a.m., it happened again. 3 knocks, then a pause, and 3 more. Day 2. The map that changed. I found it tucked into the back of the kitchen drawer. A faded, hand-drawn map of the shoreline. My cabin was marked, and so was something else. A square labeled Old Home, deep in the dunes. But that wasn't the weird part. When I looked again a few hours later, the map had changed. The square was closer now. The handwriting Messier. Beneath it, a scribble. Not gone. Waiting. That night I went walking. The dunes were quiet, still, and then I found a patch of sand that was warm, soft, and breathing. I swear it shifted beneath my feet, just a little, and a woman's voice whispered, Almost home. Day 3. The house rises. I woke to find sand piled against the back door. Not drifted, placed. Deliberate. Shaped like a staircase. And outside, where dunes once rolled smooth and even, now stood the suggestion of walls. Lines. A frame slowly surfacing. The buried house was rising. The local ranger, a man named Deke, came by on his patrol. When I mentioned the Stillbend, he turned pale. "You been dreamin' yet?" he asked. "Yes." "Of what?" "Rooms." He nodded slowly. "They get everyone eventually. The house needs tenants. And it's real persuasive." I asked him what happened if I left. His answer chilled me. "The house doesn't mind chasing." Day 4. The attic. In the sand, I started hearing music. A warped music box, playing some old lullaby. Notes echoing through the dunes like they were bouncing off walls that weren't there yet. I followed the sound and found a trapdoor just above the sand's surface, poking out like a broken tooth. It opened on its own. Inside, stairs that led downward into the dune, impossibly deep, impossibly dry. I didn't descend, but when I leaned over the opening, I saw light and movement. Children, dozens, faces half covered in sand, smiling blankly. One of them had my face, as a child. Day 5. The house takes form. By now, the structure was visible even in full daylight. A roofline, a chimney, windows, just glass panes reflecting the sky, even though no house should stand that tall above shifting dunes. Inside my cabin, everything started to change. Wallpaper bubbled. Mirrors no longer showed my reflection. The salt in the air turned sour, and every corner of the room felt watched. I tried to leave. My car was filled with sand. No, not filled. Reconstructed. Every surface grain polished into the suggestion of furniture. The house was inside my things now. It was inside me. Final night. Move-in day. The sun set blood orange behind the dunes. The entire house stood revealed. 3 stories tall. Victorian. Shimmering slightly like heat haze or mirage, but casting real shadows. The front door opened on its own, and inside stood her. A woman in mourning black. Face featureless. She held out a brass key. "Your room is ready." I screamed. Ran. Tried to make it to the shoreline. The sea wouldn't let me pass. Waves rolled backward. Sand swallowed my feet. And behind me, footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Patient. Epilogue. The new tenant. They say the Stillbend hasn't shifted in centuries. That something holds it in place. Locals claim you can see lights at night. Chandeliers flickering through the dune tops. And if you sleep nearby, you might wake up to find your floorboards breathing. Because the house beneath the dunes is always adding on. One room at a time. And it has plenty of space for you. When you work as a traveling property inspector, you see all kinds of weird, unfinished additions, crawl spaces full of mannequins, entire basements filled with sand. But nothing prepared me for the surf shack off Dagger Point. It wasn't listed under any formal property records. The GPS pin I was sent came from a handwritten referral and pointed to a crumbling stretch of beach, a dozen miles past the last paved road in Northern California. The instructions were simple. Assess structural safety. Photograph interiors. Stay no more than 3 hours. But no one warned me about the man inside. Day 1. The shack has no shadows. I arrived just after noon. The shack wasn't even visible from the path. Hidden behind a wall of dune grass and driftwood stacked unnaturally tall. When I stepped through the opening, the temperature dropped by 10 degrees. It was a single-room structure. Gray wood, slanted roof, 1 door, 1 window. No electricity.
No Anselaschen.
But the strange part?
No Sadous.
Not inside. Not under the table, not behind the door. Even with the sun glaring through the cracked slats, The light didn't cast anything. Just flat, sterile brightness. Like the whole room was pretending. Hour 1. The photo that shouldn't exist. I took pictures per protocol.
Exterior, corners, interior details.
But when I checked the camera roll, something was wrong. In one photo, the one facing the window, there was a man sitting in the corner. Tall, gaunt, wearing what looked like a wetsuit slick with brine. Head down, arms crossed over his knees. But I hadn't seen anyone. There'd been no one in the shack. I took another photo, same angle. This time, the corner was empty. I chalked it up to exposure error or lens distortion. But when I looked again, the man was in the background of every previous image, moving closer in each one. Hour 2. The wet footprints. The shack was bone dry when I entered. But at the 90-minute mark, I noticed the footprints.
Vet. Bore.
Coming from the door, tracking in a slow circle around the inside wall, around me. They weren't mine. Too wide, toes long and splayed. I backed against the table and knocked over my clipboard. When I picked it up, the top page was soaked through. Words bled through. He doesn't like to be seen. Then the window darkened, and I smelled salt. Not sea salt, rotting salt, like something dead dragged in from the undertow. Hour 3. The man speaks. I was gathering my things, ready to violate protocol and get the hell out, when the door slammed shut on its own. Hard. The room plunged into silence. Then, from the corner, the same one in the photos, came a voice. "You see too much." I turned slowly. He was there, in full daylight with no shadows to anchor him. A tall, soaked man with skin like sun-blistered leather and hair full of seaweed. His eyes were white, not blind, just empty. "The ocean leaves things behind for a reason," he said. "We are not meant to be remembered. You took my picture. Now you have to carry me." Then he smiled and vanished. Aftermath. The image that stays. I fled. Didn't log the inspection. Deleted the GPS pin. But that night I checked my phone. The image was still there. Only now the man was in the foreground, smiling. Every time I delete it, it returns. On my home screen, my lock screen. Once it showed up on a friend's phone, just after they called me. They drowned in a pool 2 days later. Now I don't take photos. I don't use mirrors. And I haven't been near the ocean since. Epilogue. The shack still stands. No one lists the surf shack anymore. But the dune trail is still there if you look hard enough. And if you go inside and take a picture, he'll be in it. And when he's close enough to see your face, it means he's ready to trade places. And he'll leave your bones in the undertow. Most beach rentals come with sandy floors, musty towels, and that ever-present tang of salt in the walls. This one came with breathing. Not mine, not human, and it only started once I found the trapdoor. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened that summer I house sat the cottage on Shrike Beach, and why I'll never step near the ocean again. Day 1. The uneven floor. The cottage was lovely on the surface. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, wraparound porch overlooking the tide. The owner, a retired marine biologist named Caleb Morrow, had left for an expedition in Patagonia. I was to check the mail, water the plants, and make sure the porch didn't collapse under wind and time. But within an hour, I noticed something odd. The floor slanted, not dramatically, just enough that if you dropped a marble, it rolled gently toward the fireplace. But there was no visible structural issue.
No sagging joists, no cracks.
The tilt seemed purposeful. That night, while brushing my teeth, I heard the first exhale, deep,
Vet.
rising from beneath the floorboards like a low tide drawing breath. Day 2. The map and the hatch. I found Caleb's map in the desk drawer, a rough sketch of the cottage foundation. One section was circled in red. A note beside it read, "Keep closed." Never open while the moon is full. Guess what phase the moon was in? I checked the area just behind the pantry. And sure enough, under a threadbare rug and a layer of dust, there was a trapdoor. Metal. Locked with a latch that had no key. That night, the breathing came again. Louder. More insistent. And this time, it was joined by something else. A whisper. Not words. Just syllables that tickled the back of my brain. Day 3. The visitor from the sea. The waves brought something in. I saw it from the porch just after sunrise. A bundle washed up on the beach. Wrapped in fishing net. Tangled with kelp. Inside bones. But not human. Thin. Curved. Hollow. Like avian but longer. Denser. The skull was intact. Ridged. Almost serpentine. With sockets that seemed too wide for eyes. I brought it back in a towel and placed it on the table, thinking to ask Caleb about it by email. That evening, the skull was gone. In its place, a puddle of salt water and a single long fingernail. Day 4. The boards flex. I couldn't sleep. The floorboards bulged upward, stretching as though something underneath was pushing. And when I stood near the hatch, I heard knocking, slow, rhythmic. I set up my phone camera overnight, facing the hatch. The next morning, the footage showed nothing for hours. Then, at 3:41 a.m., the latch began to twitch, clicked open on its own. The trapdoor lifted an inch, and 2 fingers, long, gray, barnacle-flecked, curled over the edge. I slammed my laptop shut and packed. But when I opened the front door, the ocean had risen, far past the tide line, blocking the path. Final night. The thing that breathes. The boards gave way at midnight. I barricaded the bedroom door with a dresser, held my breath, and listened. The breathing filled the cottage, now wet, rasping, gurgling with tide and teeth. Then came the voice. I was buried, too shallow. He fed me bones, but not breath. Now I want yours. The floor sagged. Hands reached under the crack in the door. Too many fingers, too long. I climbed out the window, ran barefoot along the high ridge above the rocks. Behind me, the house exhaled, so hard the windows shattered, and something wet screamed. Epilogue. Caleb never returned. They never found Caleb. Only a cottage partially collapsed, trapdoor blown open, no signs of forced entry. Just water damage and a trail of seaweed leading from the hatch to the beach. I told my story. No one believed me, but sometimes, when I walk by shorelines, I see places where the sand breathes, up and down, like something buried, dreaming, waiting for the next breath to borrow. Maybe yours. They told me not to buy the cottage at the far end of Shellbone Beach. Even the realtor gave me a weird look. It's got history, she said, folding the contract 3 times like origami. Locals don't like to walk that stretch of sand, especially after dusk. She wouldn't say more, but I got it cheap. Oceanfront, isolated, perfect for writing. It wasn't until I discovered the locked door in the floor, the one not listed in the blueprints, that I understood the price I'd paid, and why some doors are forgotten on purpose. Day 1. The hidden hatch. The cottage was simple. Cedar walls, storm shutters, a porch that leaned toward the surf like it wanted to fall in. I was sweeping under the bed when I found the edge of a trapdoor, dust-covered, unlatched.
No hinges visible.
I tried to lift it, no movement. Later that evening, I noticed something else. All the other doors in the house closed on their own. Not with the wind, not from misaligned frames. They closed exactly at 7:33 p.m. and always in the same order. Bedroom, bathroom, closet, front, like something was walking through. Day 2. The man on the beach at dawn. I walked the sand with coffee in hand. The tide was lower than I'd ever seen, exposing twisted driftwood, glassy stones, and something else. A man. standing ankle-deep in the surf, facing the cottage. He didn't move, didn't wave, just stared. I blinked, and he was gone. But when I returned to the house, the trapdoor had moved, lifted maybe an inch, and from beneath I could smell candle smoke and lavender. Day 3. The door opens that night. I sat near the trapdoor with a flashlight and a crowbar. I shouldn't have. At 2:17 a.m., I heard a soft click. It opened by itself. Inside, stone steps, descending into darkness. The air smelled like a storm that hadn't arrived yet. I descended 5 steps, heard humming, feminine, off-key, then a whisper, "Don't forget me again." The flashlight flickered. I ran back up and slammed the door. It wouldn't latch. Day 4. The guest list. While cleaning out the pantry, I found a guest book, buried behind a loose board. Names filled the pages, going back over 100 years. Each line followed by a single word. Stayed, gone, lost, opened. The last 5 entries were written in the same hand. Different ink, different pressure. The final one, my name, opened. There was no date, just a smudge, like blood dragged across the paper. Day 5. The door below the door. I nailed the hatch shut, sprinkled salt across it. Sage, prayer. Didn't matter. That night, I heard 2 doors open. One, the trapdoor. The other, something deeper, lower. A door I hadn't seen, didn't know existed. And from it crawled the woman from my dreams. Hair tangled with roots, eyes full of silt, fingers too long. She rose up the steps like water, and she smiled. You remembered. Final night. The locked-in eye tried to flee. Car wouldn't start. Phone dead. The cottage refused to let me leave. Walls shifted. Floor swelled. The trapdoor opened wider. The man from the beach stood in the doorway now, closer than ever. His mouth was stitched shut, his hands red with sea brine. The woman spoke again. He forgot me. You won't. You'll stay. She reached forward. The floor swallowed my ankles, then my knees. Epilogue. A new lock. A week later, a new listing appeared on a forgotten real estate site. Quiet writer's cottage. Perfect for solitude. Ocean access.
No neighbors.
In the photos, everything looked normal, except for one shot, just barely visible beneath the rug. A trapdoor, with a brand new lock. When my mother died, I inherited more than grief. I inherited her beach house in Anchor's Hollow, a weathered colonial perched on the edge of a cliff, the Atlantic gnawing at the rocks below. She'd lived there alone since 1993, ever since my father vanished one foggy night while fishing. She never spoke of him, never dated again, just tended to that house like it had a pulse. After the funeral, I returned to clear her things, but I found her journals instead, and a tide that rose higher than the sea ever should. Day 1. The ritual. The house felt like her, still smelled of sea lavender and lemon soap. But there were things I didn't remember. Symbols carved into the lintels, tiny sand-filled jars in every window, and beneath the bed, a dagger made of coral and bone, wrapped in kelp. The journal entry from the day my father vanished read, "He stepped beyond the surf. I told him not to answer. The ocean doesn't ask twice. Now I give it pieces of myself so it doesn't come for you." That night, I heard the surf from my dreams, but it was inside the house. Day 2. The room that wasn't there growing up. The house had 3 bedrooms. Now there were 4. At the end of the hall, a room with a salt-stained door and a knob shaped like a spiral shell. I opened it. Inside, a nursery, empty crib, rocking chair, tide chart wallpaper. The room smelled of wet leaves and lullabies. The journal had a new entry, written in my mother's handwriting, dated today. She opened the door. The tide will know now. She's next, unless she learns to trade. I didn't sleep. The waves were inside the walls now. Day 3. The man at the shore. I walked the beach at dawn. He was waiting for me, standing barefoot in the surf, gray-eyed, hollow-cheeked, wearing my father's jacket. He didn't speak, just lifted one hand, opened his mouth, and water poured out, endless and slow, running over his lips, down his chest. He pointed at the cliffs, back at the house, then at me, and mouthed a single word, "Choose." I ran. Behind me, the waves sounded like a voice, like hers. Day 4. The price. I searched the basement and found a chest marked with the same spiral shell as the nursery door. Inside, teeth. Dozens of them. Human. Clean. And a photo of my mother kneeling in the surf, holding a knife above her palm. The journal now had an entry in my handwriting. A child for a child. A father for a daughter. A house for a heart. But I hadn't written it. That night, the sea rose higher than ever, flooded the first floor, filled the halls with whispers. Each one knew my name. Day 5. The final trade. The door at the end of the hall swung open on its own. The nursery was gone, replaced by a corridor of water, flowing but dry, like it hung in air. At the end stood my father, or what was left. He smiled and spoke. "The sea doesn't take, it remembers. Your mother made her trade. Now it's your turn. Who do you give?" I had one name in my head.
Mine.
I stepped forward. The sea didn't fight me. It welcomed me. Epilogue. The new keeper. The house stands still. Locals say you can see someone in the window at night, standing, waiting. They say the tide never receded after the last storm, and that sometimes it knocks on the door, not to come in, but to see if the next trade is ready. Because grief isn't what we carry, it's what we owe. You can live your whole life near the coast and never fear the fog. Until the fog comes in with footsteps. Until it arrives with a lantern. That was the case for my cousin Joel. He lived year-round in a stilted beach house on the outer edge of Shellmist Island, just beyond the causeway, near a cliff where the ocean seemed to fall forever. I used to visit in the summers, but when he went silent last October, stopped calling, stopped posting, I took a boat out to see him. What I found wasn't a man, and the fog didn't roll in anymore. Crawled. Day 1. The lantern swinging Joel's house stood empty. No sign of struggle, no note. His boots were by the door, soup on the stove. But the lights didn't work. Neither did my phone. I figured the power was out. Storms had been rolling through the week before, so I settled in with my flashlight and sleeping bag. Around 3 a.m., I saw it from the window, a lantern, moving slowly along the dunes. Too steady to be wind, too purposeful to be drift. It swung once every 5 seconds, and behind it, a shape walked, tall, stiff, wearing what looked like a sea-soaked cloak. I blinked, and it vanished into the fog. Day 2. The fog that knocked the next morning. I found footprints in the sand.
Bore.
Leading from the tide all the way to the base of the stilted house and stopping there. No prints returned. Inside I heard knocking, not loud, soft, like bone on wood, from beneath the floor. I didn't investigate. Instead, I checked Joel's journals. He was obsessive about weather. Charts, forecasts, even fog density measurements. One entry stood out. Saw the lantern again. It's not a light. It's an eye. Blinks with the sea. Every swing a question. Every silence a command. Another entry later. I followed it last night. I think I brought something back. Day 3. The lighthouse that isn't there. There's no lighthouse on Shellmist. Never has been. But that night I saw one. Deep in the fog. A tall, narrow silhouette blinking red every 7 seconds. Even though no structure stood on that cliff. I walked toward it. and the fog parted, revealing a spiral path down the cliffside, one that hadn't existed before. Halfway down, I heard breathing, shallow, labored.
Vet.
Then the lantern swung out of the fog again, closer now, and a voice rasped, "Your cousin looked. You see now too. So now you carry." Day 4. The house remembers the house changed. Rooms warped. Doors led to wrong places. A mirror showed me standing in the fog, even while I stood in the kitchen. When I tried to leave the island, my boat was gone. Only fog surrounded the dock, miles of it in every direction. And on the water, bobbing toward me, the lantern, swinging, I heard Joel's voice from inside the fog. "Don't come back, or bring salt, but not both." Final night. Becoming the light the house filled with fog from the cracks. Couldn't breathe, couldn't see. Shapes moved in the mist, not people. Imitations, shells. I lit a candle hoping it would help. Instead, it flickered once, then blinked, in the same pattern as the lantern, and my reflection in the window changed. Not me, but Joel, mouth open, eyes full of fog. He whispered, "I passed the light to you. It keeps the hollow things back. But you can't stop swinging it now." Epilogue. Watch for the lantern. They say there's still no lighthouse on Shellmist Island. But at night, boats report a faint light on the cliffs. Swinging, blinking, calling. And if you see it, they say don't blink back. Because it's not warning you. It's marking you. And soon, you'll carry it too. My sister drowned on her 10th birthday. At least that's what the papers said. Witnesses claimed she waded too far off the coast of Clover Run Beach, slipped under a rip current, and vanished. They never found her body. But I saw what really happened. She didn't slip. She walked 10 steps into the water, and then something reached up to take her. 15 years later, I returned to the family's old beach house, the one we abandoned after she disappeared. I thought it was time to stop grieving. I didn't realize the sea had been waiting. Day 1, her voice in the waves. The house looked the same. A-frame cottage, sun-warped siding, windows crusted with salt. My key still worked, though I hadn't touched it in over a decade. Inside, dust, damp, silence, until I opened the back deck door. Then came the waves. Not just crashing, speaking. The surf curled in, then hissed back with a whisper. 9. I froze. My sister used to count her steps into the sea like a game. 1 through 10. Always 10. I closed the door. The wind sighed through the window screens, and carried her name. Day 2. The birthday dress. I found it in her old bedroom. Still hanging in the closet. Still damp. The same seafoam dress she wore the day she vanished. Untouched, unrotted, despite the years. Beneath it, her shoes, toes filled with sand. And a note I don't remember writing. If she reaches 10 again, she stays this time. The waves counted again that night. 2, 3, each crash a number. Each retreat, a pull in my chest. And I could feel her walking again. Day 3, the shell trail. It started with 1. A pink conch, placed at the top of the porch steps. Then 3 more, leading down to the path. By noon, a full trail of shells curved toward the beach. A breadcrumb path of bone-white spirals and blackened clams. Each shell etched with a number. 1 through 9. No 10. Not yet. The ocean was calm that day. Dead calm. But the sky above it churned. That night I dreamed of her, smiling, mouth full of sea foam, holding out her hand. Day 4. The steps begin again. The tide pulled far out in the morning. Too far. Revealing sand that hadn't seen sunlight in years. There, clear as footprints, were hers. Small.
Bore.
9 steps in a perfect line into the sea. The 10th one, unfinished. Waiting. The final shell appeared on the porch by evening. Number 10. I didn't sleep that night. The wind keened around the house like a child's song. And at 3:10 a.m., I heard the back door creak, and a small voice whisper, "Come with me this time." Final night. The 10th step, I followed her. I don't remember grabbing my coat or unlocking the door. Just the cold sand under my feet, the moon dragging the tide like a silver hook. She stood in the surf, no older than the day she vanished. Skin pale, eyes dark, dress fluttering in salt wind. She held out her hand. "I couldn't finish before," she said. "You stopped me. It wants one more." The water curled around my calves. The numbers echoed in my head. 9, 10. I reached for her, and she smiled with someone else's mouth. Epilogue. Missing persons. The papers reported me missing the next morning. Clothes on the beach. Footprints ending in the tide. Exactly 10 steps. They never found my body. But if you walk Clover Run Beach during the spring tide, you may find a shell trail. It always ends at the waterline. Step 9. And if you hear the sea start to count, don't listen for 10. They say if you stand on the cliffs above Redwater Cove on a moonless night, you'll see a house moving through the surf. Not a boat, not a wreck, but a fully intact beach house floating silently through the black water, windows lit from within. Locals call it the house that swims. They say it only appears after someone vanishes. I didn't believe it. Not until my brother Tom disappeared from his cabin near the cove, and I saw that strange house drift past my window just before dawn. And not until I followed it. Day 1. The waterline doesn't lie. I arrived at Tom's cabin to find his belongings untouched. Wallet, keys, coat, even a pot still warm on the stove. But his boots were gone, and so was the floor mat by the back deck. That's where I saw it, the waterline. At least 2 feet up the siding, soaked and dripping, as if the sea had come inside and left quietly. The tide hadn't been high enough for that. The boards were warped. The floor creaked under my feet like it held its breath. That night the fog rolled in hard, and through it lights, yellow, flickering, like lanterns floating across the bay, and between them a roofline. Day 2. The knocking from below. I slept in Tom's bed, figuring I'd start filing reports and canvassing the beach in the morning. But at 2:14 a.m., I woke to knocking. From beneath the floor. 3 knocks, then a pause. Then again. Louder. I leaned over the edge of the bed, and the floorboards pulsed just slightly, as if breathing. Then I heard his voice. "It floats when it feeds. Come see." Day 3. The wet staircase. I followed the sound the next day to a staircase carved into the cliff. One I swear hadn't been there before. The steps were slick with sea moss and led down into what looked like a cave, half submerged. And in the cave, an old wooden platform. Odok. And moored to it a house. Not built on pontoons. Not tied down, just sitting on the water, unmoving, windows glowing from within. I heard a piano playing, a song Tom used to practice as a kid. Something pulled me forward. Day 4. The hallway that loops. I entered through the front door. Everything looked normal: couch, fireplace, table. A picture of me and Tom from 1997 on the mantel. I hadn't seen that photo in years. I walked to the hallway. It looped. No matter how many doors I opened, I ended up back in the same spot. Same creaky board, same smell of brine and burning wood. And behind me, the front door vanished. A voice, not Tom's, but using his tone, whispered, "Once you're inside, it learns you. Once it learns you, it floats." Day 5. The engine that isn't in the basement. Yes, it had one. I found the truth. The house was alive. Its floorboards were not nailed but pulsing muscle. Its lights flickered in rhythm with a heartbeat. And in the center of the basement, a pool. Dark, still, endless. Tom stood at the edge, facing away. You came, he said. It needs someone else now. He turned. His eyes were black. His hands were webbed. And behind him, the pool began to churn. Final night. The trade the house floated again that night. I saw the cliffs recede through the windows. It moved silently, carried by no wind, no engine, just something beneath. Tom watched me from the porch. You're part of it now, he said. One leaves, one stays. You chose. And then I woke in my own bed, alone, dry, safe, except the floorboards were damp. The windows faced a different coastline, and I could hear piano music beneath the waves. Epilogue. If you see it drift, they still say the house swims. Appears when the tide turns red under the moon. If you see it, don't look inside. And if you do, don't step through the door. Because someone always has to stay. And the house already knows your name. The beach house at Gull's End had one window that never opened. Not stuck, sealed. Painted shut from the inside and out. Reinforced with rusted nails and strips of iron. A crude sign above it read, in faint charcoal letters, "Do not unseal. It knows your face." It overlooked the ocean, faced the rocks. And the day I pried it open, because I didn't believe in warnings, was the day the screaming started. Day 1. The window that watches. I inherited the house from my godmother, Meredith Holland. A woman I barely remembered, save for a locket she once gave me and a whispery lullaby I can't find in any songbook. She lived alone, died quietly, left me the house and nothing else. The house was in decent shape. White clapboard, seaweed garden, salt-bitten shutters. Everything smelled faintly of lemon and mold. But then there was the window, boarded from the inside, facing the sea cliffs like a blind eye. I asked the neighbor, an old woman named Fern, about it. She crossed herself and said, "Your aunt heard it, Callan. Don't let it see you back." Day 2. The scratching. I couldn't stop staring at it. Even through the boards, the window gave off heat, like something pressed against it from outside, breathing slow and shallow. That night, just after 3 a.m., I heard scratching. Fingernails, maybe, or claws, coming from inside the glass. Not the frame, the glass. I turned on every light, pounded on the boards. Nothing changed, until I turned off the hallway lamp. And the scratching spelled something. Let me see you. Day 3. The locket's other half. I found the second locket under a floorboard in the attic, identical to the one Meredith gave me. Only this one held a photo of me, taken just outside the beach house, but aged like from the 1970s. Worn edges, yellowed paper, and something in the background, barely visible. A face at the window, elongated, watching, his mouth too wide, his eyes too many. Day 4. The window opens. I should have left, but I didn't. Instead, I pried off the nails, pulled away the iron straps, and opened the screaming window. At first, there was only silence. Then the sea stilled. Then the wind died. And then the window screamed. A wail that shook the glass, peeled paint, sent gulls shrieking from the cliffs. And in the reflection, I saw not myself, but Meredith. Rotting, weeping, mouth open in a voiceless warning. And behind her, it. Final night. The trade. I tried to reboard the window. Too late. Salt water dripped from the ceiling. The window fogged from within. And a new message appeared, scrawled in brine. You opened it. You broke the seal. Now it will see through you. The screaming returned that night. But now it came from inside the house. Every mirror warped. Every shadow stretched. And the window smiled. Epilogue. The new pane. The house is still listed. Still empty. But the window's different now. No longer sealed. No longer silent. Just waiting. And sometimes, at dusk, Beach walkers say they hear a scream behind glass, followed by a face that matches their own. I was hired to clean out an estate on Driftshore Beach, a forgotten cliffside Victorian that hadn't had a tenant since the 1950s. The woman who hired me, a probate lawyer named Van Dorn, said the house was lightly furnished and full of antiques. Easy money, she promised. One weekend in and out. But no one told me about the names etched into the walls, or the locked guest rooms that opened only at night, or the woman who cried behind the wainscoting. Day 1. The names the house stood alone at the edge of the peninsula. A crooked thing, bleached pale by decades of salt wind. Its shutters hung like broken wings. Its porch groaned with each step, and the scent inside hit me like a wave. Seaweed, aged roses, and something faintly like rot. The foyer was quiet, too quiet. On the staircase wall, someone had etched names. Hundreds of them, all in perfect cursive, carved into the plaster in rows. At the very bottom, one new name. Mine. Day 2. The sealed rooms, there were 3 bedrooms upstairs. 2 were unlocked. The third had no handle, just a seam in the wall where a door should have been. I pressed my ear against it and heard breathing. Slow. Bit. That night, I slept in the parlor. At 2:10 a.m., I heard a door creak upstairs, then footsteps, then a voice. She's awake. Set the table. In the morning, the locked door stood open. Inside, an immaculate guest room, candlelit, table for 4, 3 empty chairs, 1 made of salt. Day 3. The salt widow appears the third night. She came to me. I woke to find her standing at the foot of the couch, tall, veiled, draped in a black gown that shimmered with wet salt. Where her feet should have been, the rug curled with decay. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her veil fluttered slightly, and beneath it I saw dozens of small mouths opening and closing, not screaming, chewing. The next morning, I found an invitation card on the mantel. Supper at moonrise. Attendance required. Day 4. The guests arrived. They came at dusk. Not through the front door, from the sea. One by one, they climbed the cliffs. Soaked. Silent. Each one wearing formal dress. Flesh bloated with tide. Faces warped by barnacles and time. They filed into the house, nodded at me, and sat at the long table in the hidden room. The salt widow stood at the head, her veil now lifted to reveal an empty face. No eyes.
No mouth.
Just holes. One guest turned toward me and whispered, "She needs one warm voice. She needs a new name." Final night. The carving I tried to leave. Found the beach gone, replaced by black sea glass and footprints moving the wrong way. Inside, the house had changed. The walls pulsed. The names on the stairs had grown longer. My name now appeared twice, once at the bottom, once halfway up. I ran to the guest room. Empty, except for the salt chair. Waiting. The salt widow stood behind it, a carving knife in one hand. She spoke in my voice. "One weekend, you said. But you've always been expected." Epilogue. A house that waits. The house is still listed in legal limbo.
No heirs.
No sale. But when the tide recedes, you can see wet footprints leading from the ocean to the front steps. And on the staircase wall, just under the trim, a new name carved with loving care. Maybe yours next. The beach at Sable Pines has no lifeguard. Never did. But if you visit just after sundown, you might still see the outline of a small wooden shack halfway up the dunes. Red painted, with a white rescue ring nailed to its side. Locals call it the shack that wasn't there. No one admits to building it. No one sees it during the day. And if you try to reach it, you'll either find nothing, or worse, you'll find him. Day 1. The red shack. I was working on a coastal documentary, low budget, high ambition. My partner, Liza, handled drone footage. I focused on on-site interviews and moody B-roll. We arrived at Sable Pines in late August, dead season. Town mostly empty, beaches flat and clean. But on our first night, Liza nudged me awake around 2 a.m. "Did you see that?" she whispered. I looked out the window. On the dunes stood a lifeguard shack, perfectly framed by the moonlight. Only, there had been no structure there during daylight. We checked the drone footage. Nothing. But the shack was still there, and a figure sat in the high chair, watching the surf. Day 2. The rules on the wall: we hiked the dunes at dawn.
No sac.
But we found 4 wooden stakes, recent, arranged in a square. In the sand nearby, we uncovered a sign half buried beneath kelp. Sable Pines Lifeguard Post #0. Emergency hours only. Stay out of the water after dark. We laughed. Maybe a performance art piece? A prank? But the sign was real. And bolted to nothing. Later that night, we heard the whistle. 3 sharp blasts from the direction of the dunes, followed by the unmistakable voice of a man yelling, "Out of the water!" Only no one was in the water. No one we could see. Day 3. The whistleman. I returned alone to the spot at 4 a.m. The shack was there again. Hole, red, weather-beaten. I climbed the steps. No one inside. But someone had scrawled on the wall in waxy red crayon, "Don't look down when the tide is backward. He can't whistle if you're quiet." The tide was full, yet moving away from shore, pulling outward, wrong. When I looked down from the tower, I saw footprints, coming up from the ocean, waterlogged, white, with 6 toes. Day 4. Liza's last footage. Liza disappeared that night. Her last shot was timestamped 3:09 a.m. Drone hovering above the beach. Clear shot of the shack. And someone in the chair, standing. Arms out. Mouth open. No face. Just a hole where the head should be. A void shaped like a scream. The drone spiraled. The feed cut to static. And Liza was gone. All we found was her whistle, the one she wore for safety, bent in half and covered in brine. Final night. The swim I tried to leave. Car engine was waterlogged. Phone stuck on an endless emergency alert I couldn't dismiss. High risk. Open water incident. Do not engage the lifeguard. The shack was closer now. 50 feet from the cabin door. The whistle sounded again. Then the voice, "One swimmer remains." I don't remember walking. I only remember standing knee-deep in the surf, unable to move, unable to look away. As the lifeguard stepped off his perch, walked toward me, and opened his mouth. Epilogue. Red paint and lost names. They paved over the dunes last year. Built a boardwalk. But the red shack still appears. Always at night. Sometimes with a whistle. And always with one swimmer too many. If you see it, do not wave. Do not swim. And whatever you do, do not let him blow that whistle a 3rd time. When Elise married Davis, everyone said it was too soon. Too fast, too strange. A man with no past, no family, and sea-gray eyes that never quite looked you in the face. But she loved him. Moved into a beach house with him. A white-paneled cottage on Whistler's Reach. A shore known for fog and strange tides. They lived there for 3 months. Then she vanished. And the next week, the house was put up for sale. I was the one who bought it. And I think I met Davis too. But I don't think he was ever a man. Day 1. The photo on the mantle. The house was immaculate. Too immaculate. Like no one had ever used it. Like all the furniture had been placed there for display, not comfort. The only personal item, a photo on the mantle. Elise and Davis smiling on the porch. But Davis's face was wrong. Blurred. As if the camera couldn't decide how many eyes he had. His fingers wrapped around hers, longer than they should be. In the photo, Elise smiled, but her eyes screamed. That night, I heard footsteps around the house. Not inside. Outside. Dragging.
Vet.
Day 2. The guest log in the hall closet. I found a notebook tucked behind cleaning supplies. A guest log. Only 2 names. Elise Calloway moved in June 12th. Davis came from the shore. Stayed in the bed. That was it. Below, a single phrase. He gets better each time. That night, something knocked on my window. Not with knuckles. With wood. I turned on the porch light and found a piece of driftwood leaned against the doorframe. Still damp. Still breathing. Day 3. Elise returns. I dreamed of Elise. Wandering the shoreline. Face covered in seaweed. Dress dripping. Holding her hands in front of her like she was offering something. She opened her palms. Inside, her wedding ring and 2 of her own teeth. I woke to the smell of rot. The house was filled with brine. On the bathroom mirror, written in steam, "He wears your face next." Day 4. The shoreline cradle. I walked the beach at dawn. Found a nest of driftwood. Coiled like a cradle. Inside, scraps of clothing. Elisa's locket. And something else. A mass of sea-slick roots, pulsing slightly. Breathing. It opened one eye. My eye. I ran. Back to the house. Found every mirror turned inward. Every photo warped. And on the mantel the image had changed. Now it was me standing beside Elise. Smiling. Final night. The ceremony. He came at nightfall. Not through the door, through the window. A shape of wood, salt. Flesh.
Familiar.
Wrong. He whispered in my voice. I wore her until she broke. You'll last longer. He reached for me, and when he touched my arm, my skin paled, toughened, began to grain, like wood. Epilogue. Another listing. The house is for sale again. Charming, secluded, with ocean views. Visitors say it's quiet, except at night, when they hear 2 people talking inside. One voice always sounds familiar, the other like wind through dead trees. And by morning, there's always driftwood on the porch, still wet. No one builds houses below the tide line, but this one was different. Low shore had always been a myth along the northern coast. A ghost beach, said to rise only during king tides, exposing forgotten ruins and strange stone foundations no one could trace. I didn't believe in that sort of thing. I was a marine surveyor, rational, measured, scientific, until my equipment picked up a structure on the ocean floor. Then dry land rose beneath it the next morning, and a house stood where no house should be. Day 1. The sea gives back. We anchored the boat at sunrise. Where the tide should have been 40 feet deep, a beach now shimmered.
No sandbars. No gradual slope.
Just dry, flat land, and in the center a 1-story house. Crumbling, ancient, barnacle-coated but whole. No path to it. No erosion pattern.
No explanation.
I walked toward it with boots crunching on shells that hadn't seen air in centuries. The door was open. Inside, a table set for 3, and on the mantel a row of preserved hearts in mason jars. The last one was still beating. Day 2. The ledger of the drowned. We explored the interior. Old furniture, rotting linens, symbols on the walls, etched in what looked like coral dust. And beneath the floorboards, a trapdoor. Inside, we found a room carved from black stone, dry as bone. At the center, a pedestal, and on it, a book bound in kelp-wrapped leather. The ledger of the drowned. Hundreds of names, dates, coordinates. The last name? My partner's. Written that morning. He hadn't written it. Day 3. The first disappearance at 2:12 a.m. My partner vanished. We'd anchored the boat offshore after retreating from the house for the night. I woke to the sound of splashing. He was gone. No signs of struggle. His life jacket left folded on the bow. Back on shore, the house had changed. Taller, A second floor had emerged. The windows pulsed with light like a lighthouse shuddering slowly. And the hearts in the jars. Now there were 4. Day 4. The room that knows you. I entered again. The layout had shifted. Each room now resembled a piece of my childhood. My kitchen. My mother's sewing room. The hallway where I'd found my brother dead from the riptide. They were perfect. Down to the smells. The last door led to a mirror. And in it stood me, soaked, bloated, grinning. I touched the glass. It was warm. My reflection whispered, "You've already drowned. You just haven't finished." Final night. The real ledger. I found the truth in the attic. The house isn't built. It's grown. Layer by layer from the memories of those it claims. Each new floor is a new life swallowed. Each window a borrowed eye. And each jarred heart a contract. Mine now beat beside the others. Rhythm synced with the tide. I tried to run, but the ocean was gone. The world around me, a copy, a reconstruction. And I realized the real me drowned years ago. Epilogue. When the tide goes out, they say low shore appears only during lunar anomalies. That sometimes beachcombers find odd houses just past the surf. Fully formed, for just one night. Some step inside. Most return. Some don't. And those who do, they never seem quite themselves. Like something behind their eyes keeps time with the sea. He washed up on Cradle Beach after the hurricane. A boy no older than 8. Naked, silent, with a lantern wick where his tongue should be. No missing persons matched. No boats were wrecked nearby. He was dry when they found him. Eyes open, staring at the sea. They called him Jonas, after the man who found him. And I was the nurse assigned to his in-home care. I should have said no. But I didn't. And by the time I realized what he brought with him, it was too late. Day 1. No voice, just light. Jonas didn't speak. Didn't blink much either. He sat for hours staring at the sea from the front porch of the old beach house, hands folded neatly in his lap. The family who took him in, the Callahans, were kind but distant. His room was empty.
No toys.
No books. Just a single oil lantern beside his bed. They told me he'd drawn it himself. It wasn't plugged in. No fuel. But sometimes it flickered, like it was alive. That night, I found sand in his footprints across the floor. Still wet. Day 2. The drawings he began drawing in charcoal. Always the same image. A row of beach houses. Each one crossed out one by one, until only one remained. And always above them, a floating figure with no face, holding a glowing lantern between its teeth. I asked him who it was. He pointed to his own chest, then opened his mouth, and the wick glowed, only for a second, but enough to fill the room with the smell of burning seawater. Day 3. The first firehouse #3 on Shoreline Row caught fire at 2:06 a.m. empty at the time. No injuries. But when I arrived that morning, Jonas had drawn it again. Now crossed out. When I asked Mrs. Callahan, she just muttered, "He's choosing." That night, I awoke to his silhouette at the foot of my bed. Eyes glowing faintly, mouth closed, but the room smelled like kerosene and kelp. Day 4. The origin. I found a story in the town's archive. An old folktale about a boy drowned in a shipwreck during the lighthouse riots of 1893. Sailors said they saw his body rise, lips glowing with flame, walking atop the water, marking homes one by one with flickering tongues of light. The next day, those homes would burn, collapse, or vanish. Locals left offerings of salt and iron to keep their addresses off his list. They called him the lantern-tongued boy. Day 5. My house in the drawing. He added a new house to the drawing.
Mine.
I wasn't even staying in it, just storing some things there. I begged the Callahans to intervene. They simply said, "He always finishes the row." I packed to leave that night, but my tires had been slashed. And in the back seat, a small oil lantern already lit. Final night. The wick burns at 3:12 a.m. I watched from the dunes as my house went up in flames.
No lightning. No arson.
Just light. The next morning, Jonas was gone. His bed empty, save for a blackened wick and a burned drawing. All the houses on Shoreline Row now crossed out. But a new row was started. Inland. And the first house drawn? The Callahans. Epilogue. The new tongue, they say sometimes you'll find strange children near the surf after a storm. Silent. Staring. And if you see a glow between their lips, even for a second, pack your things and run. Because he's choosing again. And the wick always needs fire. There's a stretch of beach behind the old shipwreck pier where nothing grows. The sand stays smooth, even in wind. Animals avoid it. Tides never quite reach it. Locals call it Sleepwalker's Dune. And no one builds near it, not anymore. But I did. My partner and I bought the last standing cottage near that spot, a crumbling A-frame known as the Marsh House, and decided to renovate it as a remote getaway. By the end of our first week, I was walking in my sleep. By the end of the second, I wasn't alone in my body anymore. Day 1. The perfect silence. The house was gorgeous in daylight. Cracked windows, faded paint, wraparound porch staring straight into the Atlantic. But the silence inside felt intentional, like sound refused to settle there. Our contractor joked that if the ghosts didn't get us, the raccoons would. But there were no animals.
No birds. No bugs.
Not even sea fleas. Just silence. That night, I woke on the porch at 3:30 a.m. barefoot, shivering, my hands covered in sand. Day 2. The voice in the sand. I installed trail cams around the house. The footage showed me walking, not aimlessly, but directly toward the dune. Stopping there. Standing. Mouthing something to the empty air. I played it back with audio filters. One word repeated. Open. That morning, I found a hole in the dune. Perfectly circular. Breathing. Yes, breathing. Slow, rhythmic contractions of sand. Like something asleep below. Day 3. The other me, my partner, said I was distant. Different. I don't remember saying anything strange. But she recorded me at dinner. In the video, my eyes don't blink. My voice is off by a half beat. I say things like, "You don't know what dreams are. You don't know what wakes when the dune sleeps. The ocean remembers your sleep." That night, she left for a hotel in town. The Marsh House didn't want her. Only me. Day 4. The bone ladder. I returned to the dune. At sunset, the hole widened. Inside, a staircase made of knotted driftwood and vertebrae. I descended 10 feet before the air turned cold. Not temperature cold. Dream cold. The space below pulsed with hums I felt in my molars. At the bottom, a mural. Thousands of faces, all sleeping. Each one with my expression. I saw my partner's face too. Eyes half closed. Mouth stitched with sea thread. I ran. But sand clung to my legs like hands. Final night. The sleep that takes. I fought it. Tried staying awake with coffee, lights, alarms. But at 2:14 a.m., everything shut off. Power died. Candle flames extinguished. And the dune opened. Sand poured through the back door. I stumbled to the window and saw myself walking toward the dune. But I was still inside the house. 2 of me now. One already claimed. The other watching. The last thing I remember. The floor breathing beneath me. Sighing in satisfaction. Epilogue. The dune still waits. They say people still by the Marsh House. No one stays long. Trail cams vanish. Sleep monitors record laughter in voices that don't match. And if you dream near the dune, you'll wake with sand in your lungs. The house doesn't need you to live in it. It just needs you to sleep in it. There used to be a public bathhouse on Havenspire Beach, a grand, seaside retreat from the 1920s with striped tents, hot salt baths, and polished marble floors. But it was lost to a storm in 1931, buried beneath a landslide of sand. Locals say it still exists down there, perfectly preserved, and that sometimes, when the tide pulls back hard enough, the very tip of its roof peeks through the dunes like a yawning mouth. I didn't believe it, not until I slipped on a run, tumbled into a hollow, and woke up inside it. Still warm, still lit, still waiting. Day 1. The locker with my name. When I came to, I was lying on a tile floor, smooth, dry, smelling of salt and lavender. I stood and turned in slow horror. Marble arches, gaslight sconces, benches carved with sea motifs. I was in an underground bathhouse, but there was no entryway.
No doors.
Except for a single row of lockers, antique brass numbers. And one stood open. #109. My birth date. Inside, folded clothes perfectly dry.
Mine.
Day 2. The attendants. I wandered the tiled halls. Steam drifted from unseen sources. Water flowed under grates in rhythmic pulses, like veins. I heard voices, faint, cordial. Welcome back. You look tired. Let's soak. I turned a corner and saw them. 3 men and 1 woman in faded striped uniforms. Skin pale, hands too smooth, faces familiar but wrong, like copies of people I almost remembered. They smiled with gray lips and said, "The water remembers all guests," then bowed and disappeared through the wall. Day 3. The pool beneath the mirror. I found the central bath chamber that morning. An oval pool, perfectly still. Above it hung a ceiling mirror, huge, round, stained with salt. But the reflection didn't match the room. In the mirror, the pool was full of bodies, floating, sleeping, mouths just barely open. When I blinked, the mirror cracked, one slow fracture down the center, and the water began to churn. A soft chant echoed from the walls. One bath, one rest forever. Day 4. The other me. I tried to escape. Every hall led to another chamber. Every stairwell circled back to the lockers. And then I saw him, me, sitting calmly in a lounge chair, smiling, wearing the same clothes, holding my phone. He said nothing, just gestured toward the pool. His shadow was wrong. It moved before he did, and the tile beneath his feet was wet. Final night. The towel fold. When I awoke, I was wrapped in linen, folded neatly on a marble bench, and something whispered from within the steam, "Guests may leave when dried." I ran to the lockers. Each one now bore names I knew, friends, family, even strangers I'd passed in town. All marked soaked. Only mine read, steamed, drying. Then the lights flickered, the mirror shattered, and beneath the water, 1,000 eyes opened. Epilogue. The bathhouse awaits after certain storms. You can hear strange hissing sounds in the dunes, like steam under pressure. Some say the bathhouse opens its doors when the sand sinks just right. And if you find a towel folded in your car, or your clothes smelling faintly of salt and lavender, it means your room is ready. My grandmother's house always had one locked door. Even after she died and left me the beach cottage on Pelican Strand, even after I gutted the kitchen and replaced the wiring, the room off the eastern hallway stayed locked. I tried every key, every tool, even had a contractor look at it. His report said, "No room there, just exterior wall." But I heard things behind that door. Waves, whispers, and a low hum that smelled like seaweed and cold wind. I only ever saw it open once, and I never should have stepped inside. Day 1. The locked room that changes the door was always there. Some days painted white, others peeling navy blue. Once I swore it had a window. Each time I walked past it, something changed. The doorknob, the shadows, the feel of the air colder, heavier. One morning I left coffee outside the door as a joke. When I came back, the cup was empty, but the coffee was still warm. Day 2. The sound that knows my name, it started whispering at night. From behind the door. Not loud, not threatening, just intimate.
Sam.
It's high tide. Come see. My name, my voice, not an echo, a mimic. And the walls around the door would fog. Actual condensation like steam off seawater. That morning, the tile beneath the door warped. Soggy. When I stepped on it, the grout whispered back. Day 3. The fog comes in, it appeared in the living room. At 3:22 a.m., I woke to the smoke alarm. Not from fire, but from dense fog pouring out of the hall. I followed it. The locked door stood ajar, and beyond it not a room, a cove, lit by gray moonlight, surrounded by cliffs I'd never seen before. A single chair faced the water, occupied by me, or something wearing me. It turned and whispered, "This is where you wait when the sea forgets you." Day 4. The guests in the fog, they came through the room, one at a time,
Dripping wet.
smiling too wide. They walked into the hallway, looked around, and passed through the front door without opening it. I tried to film it. The footage only showed me sleepwalking, talking to no one, standing in the open fog, saying, "It's low tide, let them out." The next morning, every mirror in the house was fogged from the inside, and my clothes were wet. Final night. The door opens wide at 3:22 again. I stood before the door. It opened on its own. Inside, waves lapping at stone. A path of glass pebbles leading to a wooden boat. A voice from the mist. "We kept your place. You brought them through. Now stay." I tried to run, but my feet left wet footprints, and my mouth spoke without permission. The fog remembers. The fog repeats. I stepped in. The door shut. Epilogue. The room no one remembers. Visitors to the house report odd dreams. They never recall a room off the eastern hallway, even if they see the door. But every now and then it's open, and filled with mist, and sometimes someone steps out of it, wearing your clothes, saying your name, looking for a house that isn't theirs anymore. The beach at Mourner's Rest is made of bones. Not shells, not coral, not sand. Bones. Tiny, smooth fragments that clink underfoot like wind chimes. No one lives nearby anymore. The cottages have rotted to spines. The dunes are overgrown, except for one house, pale yellow, sea-facing, still standing with its porch lights on. I didn't mean to find it, but I heard the shore rattling in my dreams, and something inside me walked the path back. Day 1. The house that remembers the yellow house was unlocked. The porch light flickered as I stepped inside. Every floorboard creaked as if sighing in relief. A table was set for one. A kettle boiled on the stove. And on the mantel sat a photo of me. Not recent. A child, standing barefoot in bones, holding a jar of teeth. I didn't remember it, but the house did. Day 2. The mourner at 3:30 a.m. I heard weeping. Low, hoarse, not from grief but hunger, came from beneath the floor. I lifted the rug in the parlor and found a hatch, scratched with dozens of names. Many crossed out. At the bottom, mine, carved fresh. That morning I found bones on the porch steps, arranged in a circle. Inside it, my toothbrush, my socks, a strand of my hair. Day 3, the rattling trail. I followed the bones. They stretched along the beach in a winding path, clicking softly as the wind blew. Each one had words carved into them. We ate the first. We left the second. You are the third. The trail led to a dune with a stone slab embedded in its side. A mausoleum door. The moment I touched it, my ears filled with sobbing.
Familiar.
Like my mother crying after my brother drowned. But I never had a brother. Did I? Day 4. The cradle below the hatch opened on its own. Inside, a spiral stair made of jawbones and ribs. I descended, found a room lit with oil lamps made of skulls. At the center, a stone cradle. Inside it, a figure swaddled in kelp, infant-sized, face shifting between mine and someone I don't remember. Above it, the ceiling whispered, "Sleep, little mourner. Rest, little bone." I stumbled back, but the floor didn't let me leave. Pulsed, rocked, cradled me. Final night. The name you gave. I tried to burn the house. The flames lit, but turned blue. Cold. They laughed. Every window filled with fog. Every mirror showed me older, boneless, hollow-eyed. The floor split. The figure rose. Thin, long-limbed, mouth filled with clattering teeth. Spoke with my voice. "You named me once. You buried me. Now let me back in." And behind it, I saw every face I never remembered losing. And all of them were calling me back. Epilogue. The bones don't stay buried. The house still stands. The porch light still flickers. The beach still rattles with every wave. They say you shouldn't collect the white fragments there. They're not shells. They remember too much. And they might remember you. Because everyone mourns someone. And mourner's rest always keeps what we bury. The tide comes in differently at Wrecker's Hollow. Not with waves, but with a kind of pressure. Like the sea is holding its breath until it swallows the shore. The locals say that's when he walks. The man with the tide. Always waist deep. Always smiling. Always waiting for someone to answer his knock. I never believed it. Not until I spent 3 nights at my cousin's beach house on that godforsaken stretch of sand. By the 4th, I understood. Some tides don't pull you under. They invite you in. Day 1. The waterline marked the house had a stain. A dark line running across every wall. Exactly 4 feet from the floor. It didn't wash off. Didn't sand away. And every morning it was wet. I asked my cousin, Emily, about it before she left town. She just said, "Don't open the door when it knocks." Then handed me a ring of keys and drove away like she was escaping something. That night, I sat in the living room listening to gulls and wind. At 2:11 a.m., I heard 3 knocks on the back door. Measured. Bit. I didn't answer. Day 2. The footprints in the kitchen in the morning. The back door was locked, but the tile floor was wet. Saltwater footprints led from the door to the sink and back. I followed them. They stopped at the corner cabinet. Inside, wrapped in a linen towel, was a journal. Waterlogged, molded, its pages scrawled with warnings. Don't greet him. He takes politeness as permission. Never invite him to sit. If he smiles, you've already said yes. The next page had names, all crossed out, except one, mine. Day 3. The window tapper. The door didn't knock again, but the windows tapped. Every one of them, like long fingers pressing the glass, testing. At 2:11 a.m., I peeked through the kitchen curtain. He was there, a man, naked to the waist, skin slick, hair plastered to his skull like seaweed, grinning. I shut, as if dreaming while standing. And then he whispered, "High water's coming. You said you'd join me." My breath fogged the glass. His didn't. Day 4. The voice in the drain. All the pipes began to gurgle. The tub, the sink, even the toilet. Salt water sloshed up through the drains, warm and rhythmic. From the kitchen sink, I heard his voice again. "This was your house once. You drowned here before. Let's go back." The stain on the walls had risen an inch. The tide was climbing the wood. And I remembered something. A dream? A memory? Falling. Being held. salt water in my lungs, and a voice saying, "One day you'll be ready." Final night. The knock comes inside, no doors opened, no windows broke. But at 2:11 a.m. he was in the house, standing in the hallway, dripping onto the rug, smiling wider now, his mouth opening too far. Inside, not teeth, a tide, a moonlit, black tide moving behind his eyes. I backed into the corner. He raised one hand and said, "High water, you invited me years ago." I blinked, and the tide came through the walls. Epilogue. A house left behind. They say the house at Wreckers Hollow is unlivable now, flooded without rain, abandoned with fresh salt water still seeping from the beams. And sometimes, if you stand close at 2:11 a.m., you'll hear a knock. Don't answer, because he's already inside, and he's still smiling. The story of Bleakridge Cove begins with a shipwreck, but not the kind you'd expect.
No twisted hui. No scatter dreki.
Just a single child, crawling from the surf with sea glass eyes and a chain dragging behind her. The beach house nearby, a vacant summer rental, was never the same. Neither was the town, because once you see the anchor child, you belong to her. And once she drags her chain across your doorstep, your house is next. Day 1. A knock beneath the floor. I didn't know the local legends when I rented the house. Cheap, off-season, beautiful view, perfect for a quiet place to write. But that first night, I woke to a strange sound beneath the floorboards. A dragging noise, then a knock, not at the door, from under my bed. 3 knocks, then a child's voice. "I'm here. Don't forget." Day 2. The chain in the dunes. I found it during my morning walk. A rusted chain half buried in the sand, stretching inland from the surf to just beneath the house. It ended beneath the crawl space, where the soil was darker, sunken. Something had been dragged in, or out. I took a photo. Later, when I checked my phone, the chain wasn't in the picture, but something else was. A girl's handprint, pressed against the inside of the lens. Day 3. The anchor room, the 3rd bedroom, had always been locked. My rental agreement said it was used for owner storage, but that morning it stood open. Inside, a cradle made of driftwood and iron, rocking by itself. Walls covered in nautical charts, all showing impossible depths just offshore. In the center of the floor, scratched deep into the wood, "Anchor me, or I drift." I closed the door. It didn't lock again. Day 4. The sea keeps records. The tide pulled back further than it should, exposing a stone outcrop with carvings. Names. Hundreds. Some marked with a compass rose. Others crossed out. The last name? Mine. I tried to leave that night, but the car wouldn't start. The front tires were stuck in chain links that hadn't been there before. The child stood on the porch, arms outstretched, mouth closed, eyes full of tide. Final night. The drowning without water. The chain dragged itself into the house, coiled around chair legs, the table, my ankles. It was warm like blood or breath. I ran to the anchor room, found the cradle filled with seawater, and inside the child, sleeping, dreaming me. I tried to scream, but the air was brine. She opened her eyes and whispered, "You're heavy now. You'll hold me down." And the house began to sink. Epilogue. Some homes are ballasts. No one rents the beach house anymore. It's still there, sort of, listing sideways, buried in the sand, its windows salt-fogged and hollow. But at certain tides, a chain surfaces on the beach, tugging, looking for a new name. If you hear knocking below your floorboards, don't answer, unless you're ready to drift. There's a strip of coastline in Dover's Crook where the houses don't have numbers. Locals say the sea keeps claiming them. That mail goes missing. GPS maps redraw themselves. And even property deeds come back with the house listed simply as unnumbered east of Tide's Teeth. I thought it was urban legend until I moved into a rental that wouldn't stay on the grid and realized it wasn't just mail or maps going missing. It was people. Day 1. The vanishing address, the lease said 328 Harker Point Road, but the mailbox had no number. The curb? Blank. Even my Uber driver couldn't find it. Dropped me 2 blocks away. I asked the rental agent. She laughed nervously. Oh, it's always been a bit off the books. Just don't try to pin it down. The house doesn't like that. Inside, the walls were pristine. But behind the wallpaper in the hallway, someone had scratched dozens of numbers, all crossed out, except one, 328. Day 2. The number in the mirror in the guest bathroom. The mirror steamed up after my shower. I hadn't turned the water that hot. But there, in the fog, a new number had appeared, 326. I wiped it away, turned my back. When I looked again, 324. The house was counting down, and I had no idea what happened when it reached 0. Day 3. The caller without a voice. I started getting calls. No number, no ringtone, just voicemail pings. Each message was static, except for a whisper at the end. You don't live here. Not yet. The doorbell rang that evening. No one there. Just an envelope on the welcome mat. Inside, a black slip of paper with 320 embossed on it. My hands began to tremble, because when I opened the front door again, the house behind me was no longer mine. Day 4. The house across the shore. I ran to the edge of the dune. Saw a line of houses along the beach. Some lit, some dark, but one stood out, a perfect mirror of mine. Same porch, same roofline, same cracked window on the left, but reversed. A mirror house, and in its window stood me, smiling, holding a sign that read, 314. Final night. The number consumes. I tried to leave. Every road looped back. The car GPS blinked out. My location now said, error, property unrecognized. Inside, the walls had begun to peel. Not paint, reality. The mirror now showed 300. The floor shook, and voices echoed from the drains. When it reaches 1, it chooses. When it reaches 0, you're inside forever. I screamed, and the house exhaled. Epilogue. The missing block. No one remembers the street having a 328. Ask the town records, and they'll say, that address never existed. But some nights, mailmen swear a house appears between numbers, just for a moment, and if you see it, don't walk toward it, because the moment you read the number aloud, it starts counting again. When you buy a house at auction $4.1, you expect issues. I expected mold, asbestos, maybe a collapsed deck. What I didn't expect was a hand-delivered envelope from the sea, bearing the words, the Turn House Agreement. By living here, you consent. Consent to what? No one would say. But the longer I stayed, the more the tides pulled close. And soon, the sea wasn't just rising. It was remembering me. Day 1. The paper that wouldn't burn. The envelope arrived on my first morning.
No stamp.
Just damp parchment, sealed in wax with the imprint of a seabird. A turn. Inside, 6 pages of script outlining vague rules. Do not occupy the house during eclipses. Sleep facing inland. Accept guests who arrive in silence. I tried to burn the contract. The paper screamed. Not metaphorically, actually screamed. The fire hissed out, and the paper was untouched. Day 2. The unseen guests. That night, I heard footsteps upstairs. Heavy, slow, dragging. But the second floor was empty, except for the open guest room, which I never unlocked. Inside, 4 chairs arranged in a circle. salt scattered in symbols on the floor, and a wet footprint the size of a dinner plate. The next morning, the contract had updated itself. Guests may rearrange furniture as needed. Day 3. The living window, the kitchen window pulsed. That's the only way to describe it. Like a second heartbeat in the wall. At sunset, it fogged over from the outside, and an eye appeared in the glass. Large, yellow, watching. When I looked away, the light fixture above me swung hard, as if something had moved through the room fast. The contract now read, "Do not ignore the window when it watches. It's impolite." Day 4. The bird with my voice a turn perched on the mailbox at dawn. They weren't native here, not in decades. It stared at me, then spoke. In my voice, "You agreed. Stay seated." Then it dropped something at my feet, a key with no teeth. The doorbell rang. No one there, but the key glowed faintly. And inside, the lights dimmed in rhythm with the tide. Final night. The debt is due. The contract disappeared, replaced by a single note, pinned to my bedroom wall with a fishhook. "Your term ends at the blood tide." I looked outside. The sea was red, climbing the dunes, not crashing, crawling. And from the sand rose figures, slick, scaled, wearing driftwood masks. They entered without knocking, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. Epilogue. New terms. The Turnhouse still stands. Sometimes you'll see someone sitting on the porch, smiling blankly. They never blink, never wave, just sit, waiting for the next agreement to arrive on the tide. Because the sea always collects, especially on deals sealed in salt. Everyone in Breakers Hollow knew to stay away from the Saltbox House. It sat alone at the edge of the cove, 3 stories high and leering over the rocks like it hated the land beneath it. They called it the Widow's House, and if you rented it in the off-season, as I did, you'd find the 3rd-floor window open every morning. Even if it had been locked, even if the ladder was gone, and sometimes the wind would carry whispers. "He's almost home." Day 1. The window that breathed. I arrived in October. Windy, off-grid, perfect for writing. The locals only said one thing when I told them where I was staying. "Don't speak to the man in the tide coat." I assumed it was some folklore thing. I dealt with worse in Erbs. The house was creaky but charming, until I noticed the 3rd-floor window. It opened every morning by 4:00 a.m. sash pushed all the way up. And the smell of brine on the stairs. Always the stairs. Day 2. The husband returns. I found the letter in the nightstand. Old, faded, unsent. From the widow to her husband. A sailor lost at sea in 1887. "I know you'll find your way home. The tide is never late. The window will be open." She signed it, "Forever waiting, until I hear your boots." That night, I heard footsteps on the 3rd floor. Boots. Vet. Dragging kelp. I didn't go up, but something came down, and it paused at my door. Day 3. The smiling widow. I woke to find someone had made tea. 2 cups, still warm. On the counter, an old photo newly framed. The widow smiling, and next to her, a tall man in a long coat soaked dark with water. His face, scratched out. On the back, a note. He found his way, as they always do. The mirror in the hallway no longer reflected me properly. I was slightly off. My left eye blinked slower. Day 4. The sea inside the plumbing burst. But not with water, with sand. Pipes filled with it. The bathtub overflowed with tiny fish and brine. And in the condensation on the mirror, someone had written, "Almost ashore." At 3:18 a.m., the door at the top of the stairs opened on its own, and something stepped onto the landing, heavy, slick, and humming the widow's lullaby. Final night. The coat on the hanger. I tried to leave. The car keys were gone. Phone drowned. Literally, wet in my bag, though I hadn't touched water. In the foyer, a long black tide coat now hung on the hook, and beside it boots, still dripping. I turned to run, but the window above creaked open again, and the tide coat filled, lifted, stepped toward me. From the inside. Epilogue. The widow no longer waits. They say the Saltbox house still opens its window every night. And sometimes people see a woman's shape watching from it, or a man in a long coat pacing the upstairs floor. No one rents it twice, and those who do never remember checking out, only waking up somewhere else, wearing boots filled with sand. I found the bell my second day at the shore house. Tiny, rusted, attached to a frayed red string hanging above the fireplace. It didn't ring normally, only when no one touched it, and only when you weren't looking. But if it rang while you were asleep, you'd wake up remembering the ocean wrong. Day 1. The note behind the mantel. The bell wasn't listed in the property records. Neither was the string. Curious, I reached up to take it down. It shocked me. A single pulse like a static jolt made of memory. Behind the mantel I found a note, water-stained and old. The bell rings when something comes close. If you hear it while dreaming, do not wake. Let it pass through. Do not see it. I put the note back. That night it rang once, and the dream I had was of drowning gently, while something massive watched me sleep from above. Day 2. The coral forms. I woke to find coral growing from the wood. Tiny red branches, curling around the bedposts, windowsills, even the faucet handles. It crumbled if I touched it, but reappeared hours later. Stronger, thicker. I turned on the sink and the water came out pink. And then the bell rang 3 times. Once for each window. All at once. Day 3. The dream. You don't leave. That night I fell asleep on the couch. In the dream, the house was underwater. Still standing but tilted. Furniture floating in place. And a figure walked through the submerged hallway. Barefoot, eyes closed, bell around its neck. When it passed me, the water went still. My ears filled with the sound of bells, hundreds, maybe thousands, ringing from somewhere deeper. I woke gasping, mouth full of seawater, and coral dust on my chest. Day 4. The third sound. Until now, the bell only rang when I was asleep or turned away. But today it rang while I stared at it. The string had grown longer, touched the floor now, and the shadow it cast swayed, even when nothing moved. I unplugged every appliance, boarded the fireplace. Still it rang. This time, the house swayed, like it floated, like it wasn't on land anymore. Final night. The visitor from below. I stayed awake, knife in hand, every light on. And at 2:44 a.m., the bell rang continuously. A fevered jingle that made my teeth ache. Then silence. Then a knock. Not at the door. From inside the walls. The floorboards rippled. And coral began blooming up the stairs, fast and pulsing. Something moved in the hallway mirror. Not my reflection, but a drowned version of me. Eyes empty, bell swinging from its throat. And it smiled. Epilogue. Bell left ringing. I fled the house. Never went back. But sometimes when I turn the corner of certain streets, I hear a soft ting in the wind. People who rent that property now, they never notice the bell until the second night. And if they dream during the ringing, they often wake facing the sea, smiling, waiting for the tide to take them home. The porch wasn't supposed to be there. I rented the beach house in winter, off-season, cold winds, cheaper rates. The listing showed no porch, just a narrow deck overlooking the dunes. But when I arrived, it was there. A full wraparound, white painted, old but solid. And something about the floorboards. They hummed. They liked when you walked across them barefoot. They liked it even more if you bled. Day 1, the welcome mat, it looked like a standard doormat. Faded letters spelling. Welcome to the sink. I assumed it was a joke. Some coastal in-joke I didn't get. Until I stepped on it. The board beneath dipped slightly, more than wood should, yielded, and I swear something shuddered under the house. I backed off. But that night I found footprints on the porch, mine, but reversed. Toes pointing toward the door. Day 2. The nail in my foot, I stepped on a nail while taking out the trash. Right through the heel. But when I looked down, the porch board had split slightly, the nail upright as if placed there. Blood pooled quickly, and the porch drank it. Not absorbed, actually sucked it in, the red disappearing between boards. That night, I heard creaking outside. The boards moving on their own. Stretching. Day 3. The whisper beneath, I lay awake. Floor creaking in rhythm with the waves. Then I heard it. A whisper. Sink with us. Feed the porch. Sleep beneath. The next morning, the railing had shifted positions. Now angled toward the dunes. Like it wanted me to step off. And there, at the base of the stairs, a gift. A single finger bone, perfectly clean. Wrapped in seaweed. Day 4. The dream step, I dreamed of the porch, vast, endless, made of teeth instead of wood. I walked across it, barefoot. Every step throbbed. I turned, saw my house swallowed whole, sinking beneath the planks like a sandcastle at high tide. Then I woke up, at the edge of the stairs, 1 foot over the final step. The welcome mat beneath me reading. You've been dinner final night. The house that dropped the tide was far out, moon high, and the board sang, yes, sang, in a deep wooden moan. I opened the front door. The entire porch rippled, expanded, welcomed me, and when I tried to turn back, the door was gone, just endless wood, and beneath it, shifting sand, claws, hinges, teeth. I stepped forward, and the porch finally fed. Epilogue. Never built, never bought. The house was condemned last spring. Locals say the porch never existed. Contractors swear there's no foundation. But every so often, you'll see a plank of white wood drift in with the tide. If you step on it barefoot, you'll hear a hum. And the boards will remember you. Because the porch is always hungry. And it loves return guests. The first time I saw him, he was just a shape on the shoreline. Still, too still. Made of driftwood lashed together with sea-rotted rope and kelp. I thought it was an art installation. Until it moved. And until I realized every night I stayed in the beach house, he stood closer. By the 6th night, he was on the porch. Day 1, washed ashore, I came to the coast to paint. The house I rented was secluded, tucked along a curve of cliff called Shoal's End.
No neighbors.
No roads, just wind and gulls. On my morning walk, I spotted him. A human-like figure assembled from driftwood pieces, some polished, others jagged, standing upright at the water's edge. An artist's creation, maybe? But that night, during dinner, I looked out the front window. He was 50 feet closer. Day 2. Salt in the walls, I smelled him before I saw him. A heavy rot, not like decay. More like wet wood left in still water too long. That morning, salt streaks covered the inside walls of the living room. As if someone had splashed the walls with seawater and let it dry in long, deliberate lines. Outside, he stood at the edge of the dune, facing the house.
No footprints.
No tracks. But the sand near him looked scraped, like he'd been dragged there. Day 3. The painting that painted itself, I found a canvas in the attic. Old. Framed. At first blank. But as I stared, brushstrokes began to appear. Slowly, like moisture bleeding into it from behind. It formed a figure. The driftwood man. Same pose. Same ropes. But with a new detail. He held a piece of wood with my name carved into it. That night, I dreamed of being tied together. limb to limb, ropes soaked in salt, and something whispering, "You'll hold better than the last." Day 4. The knock without knuckles. There was a knock on the door. Heavy. Scraping. No one was there, just a gift. A bundle of driftwood, lashed together with twine. Each piece engraved with a word. Him. Make. New. The smell of rot hit me so hard I vomited. That night, the painting changed. The driftwood man now had my face. Final night. The joining at 3:33 a.m. The windows shattered inward. Not broken, just pulled. Sand poured into the living room like a tide. And from it he rose.
No footsteps.
No weight. He extended a hand. Long fingers made of knotted roots and whalebone. In his palm, a wooden slat. My signature burned into it. He pressed it to my chest. And my heartbeat changed. Became slower. Hollow. Like waves hitting hollow logs. Epilogue. He stands still again. They say the figure still appears on the beach after storms. Always still. Until it isn't. New renters find driftwood bundles on their porches. And the art gallery in town hangs a painting of the beach that changes each week. Lately, the man has had eyes. And they follow you, especially if you've touched the sand.
Everyone in Tidewake remembered Della Reed.
The reclusive artist who painted ocean portraits that made you cry, but never showed her own face in photographs. They said the sea loved her too much, so it took her, not her life, just her face. And now, if you stay in her beach house during a storm, she might come looking for yours. Day 1. The blurred mirror. The house smelled like linseed oil and brine. Every surface bore fingerprints in paint except the mirrors. Those had been scratched out or removed. Only one remained, in the upstairs guest room. Fogged, edged with rust. And when I looked into it, I saw someone else standing behind me. She didn't move. She didn't blink. But she smiled. And my reflection didn't. Day 2. The portrait room. I found it hidden behind a sliding panel. Hundreds of canvases. All ocean scenes, each with a figure standing in the surf. Back turned, face obscured. Each one signed, D. Except the last. It had no signature. But it showed the house itself at night, with a person standing in the upstairs window, staring out, wearing my clothes. Day 3. The easel that waits. The studio light wouldn't turn off. Every time I left the room, the easel would shift slightly, move an inch, turn to face the window, and each morning, a fresh canvas appeared. First blank, then slowly filling, brushstroke by brushstroke, with an image of me, less and less complete each day. Today, it only painted my body. No face, just smooth skin where features should be. Day 4. The storm paints back. The sky cracked open. Rain battered the house sideways. And the mirror in the guest room began to hum. Not reflect, hum, like a tuning fork submerged in ocean water. In the mirror, I saw her. Della. Skin the color of driftwood. Eyes like holes in canvas. Face blank, except for brushstroke scars. She mouthed, "I gave mine. You must too." The house shifted. Paintings fell. And the easel turned to face the hallway. Final night. The self-portrait. I woke with a paintbrush in my hand. My clothes soaked with pigment. At the easel, a new painting. Myself. Bound in sea vines. Standing in the surf. Smiling with Della's lips. I screamed. Turned away. And felt my face slide. To the floor. Like a mask. And from behind me, she whispered, "Now we match." Epilogue. The artists exchange. The house is boarded up now. But on foggy nights, locals say they see a new painting in the upper window. A face they almost recognize. Sometimes it looks like a tourist who went missing. Sometimes it looks like someone you've dreamed. And if you ever wake up in a strange house with paint under your nails, Check the mirror. If it hums, she's already chosen you. It was never on the blueprint. I checked the day we moved in. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, wraparound porch.
No cellar. No basement.
No 4th door. But one night, during a storm, I found it. Behind the bookshelf, slightly ajar. Cool, salt-thick air poured from it. And from inside, the sound of waves crashing miles beneath the floorboards. Day 1. The door that dripped the door wasn't there in the morning. But the floorboards were wet, slick with brine. I pressed my ear to the wall. Something breathed behind it. Not mechanical. Not wind. Breath. Slow. Hollow. That night, I dreamed of a hallway lit with sea lanterns, each one held by a drowned version of me. They led to a door with my name on it. When I woke, the bookshelf had moved 2 inches. Day 2. The floodline, a faint stain appeared around the perimeter of the house, like water rising. Even though the beach was calm, even though it hadn't rained, I found seaweed on the kitchen tile, coiled into words, "Room's awake." That night, the door reappeared, slightly wider open. Inside, a spiral staircase, stone, ancient, and dripping wet. I didn't go down, but I could hear singing, from something large and patient. Day 3. The house remembers the family that owned the home before us disappeared. No record of their departure. Just a note in the attic. We went where the walls lead. The room wanted us. The water is warm. I pulled the bookshelf back. This time the door was gone. In its place, a porthole from the inside wall. And through it I saw the staircase again, but deeper, spiraling down into black water, and bubbles rising from something massive, breathing up toward me. Day 4. The water level, it rose to my knees. Not outside, inside. I woke with damp sheets, floor puddled, salt crusted in the corners of my eyes, and the walls now bowed inward slightly, like held breath. The mirrors fogged from behind, and when I looked in them, I saw water filling my lungs. From the inside out, the porthole vibrated. The door was back, wide open, waiting. Final night, the descent. I went in. What else was I supposed to do? The staircase pulsed underfoot. Not solid, not liquid. Each step darker, each breath heavier. At the bottom, a room, perfectly square, airless, lit from within. And in the center, a version of me, eyes closed, floating, tethered to the floor by strands of light and barnacles. It opened its eyes, smiled, and whispered in my voice, "You're late." Then everything turned blue. Epilogue. When the room opens, the house has new owners now. They've never seen the door, but sometimes they wake soaked. Their furniture shifts an inch each night toward the wall, and a soft tide rises without warning. If you ever find a door that shouldn't be there, don't open it. But if it opens by itself, don't look down, because the drowned room only fills when it's seen. There's a type of sand the locals won't touch. They call it night sand, black as ink, silky, soundless underfoot. It appears after the tide recedes but before dawn, patches of it where there shouldn't be any. And if you find it beneath your beach house, don't step in it, because night sand doesn't just swallow your footprints, keeps them. And if it takes enough, it starts walking back. Day 1. The sand inside the rental looked perfect, elevated, bright, oceanfront. But when I arrived, the crawl space was full of black sand, not tracked in, formed there. No one could explain it. The property manager claimed it wasn't there during inspection. I scooped some into a jar. By evening, it had disappeared. The jar now held seawater. That night, I woke to faint, granular breathing beneath the floorboards. Day 2. The reverse tides. The beach was wrong. The tides pulled toward the shore instead of away, little waves skimming up the sand. I stepped in a patch of dark grains while jogging. My foot sank an inch too deep. Felt, grabbed. When I pulled free, there were indentations still forming, like something under the surface had followed my motion in slow, perfect mimicry. At sunset, there was a knock at the door. No one there, just damp sand on the welcome mat, shaped like a bare heel. Day 3, what follows the sand spread. Inside the house, at first just near the doors, then in corners, under the stairs, the edge of the tub. Everywhere I stepped, I left prints, but they were always joined by a second pair, just behind, smaller.
Bora.
That night, I woke to the sound of someone dragging a foot along the hallway. The carpet pulled taut, and a whisper, "You made me in your image. Now I walk too." Day 4. The mirror footsteps. The mirror in the hall steamed itself. There were footprints inside the reflection, not on the glass inside. I watched one form in real time, a small, dark footprint pressed into the inside of the mirrored floor. Then another, and another, toward the glass. The jar I used to scoop the night sand shattered. Inside it, my sock, still warm, but I hadn't taken off my socks. Not yet. Final night. When the sand stands, it rose at 3:47 a.m. A column of night sand in the center of the living room. First featureless, then forming a rough torso, arms, legs. A face shaped like mine but smoother.
No mouth.
It raised its hand, showed me my own skin, flayed, delicate, like a snakeskin pulled off in one piece. It stepped forward and said, in a whisper, "You walked me into being. I only want to go where you go." And the floor sank. Epilogue. The prints that never fade. They say that house won't stay clean. Even when no one's inside, footprints appear, always two sets. One normal, one bare. People who stay there too long begin to see footprints ahead of them in town, shaped like their own, until one day they step in black sand, far from the beach, and vanish, leaving only prints walking toward the sea. When I bought the place, the realtor said it had a $1 million view. He wasn't wrong. Ocean horizon, morning sun, gulls wheeling over soft tide. But there was one window that didn't face the ocean. At least not this ocean. From that room, the sea was wrong. The waves moved backwards. The sky pulsed red at night. And sometimes shapes rose from the surf, watching, waiting, inviting me to come through. Day 1. The glass that looks back the window was in the upstairs study. Tall, arched, salt-streaked. At first, I thought it was decorative. No view, just dark glass. But at 2:11 a.m., I saw it clearly. A full ocean scene, but not the same one out front. It was storming in the glass, even though the night was calm. And just beneath the surface of that false sea, eyes opened. Huge, pale, blinking once. Then the glass fogged over from the inside. Day 2. The reflection leaves while brushing my teeth. I saw something in the bathroom mirror. Not behind me, inside the mirror, behind the glass. A shape, familiar. Me. But when I moved, it didn't. It just stared. Its mouth slowly opening wider than mine could. And then it whispered, "The sea behind the sea is waiting." Later, I found a wet footprint on the rug in the study. 3 toes.
No heel.
Facing the window. Day 3. The room that stinks of brine. The entire room reeked of sea rot. Not mildew, deep water decomposition like something drowned centuries ago. I opened the window. Instead of air, it exhaled.
Tic, vet pret.
And the view had changed. Now a craggy black coastline under violet clouds. The sea was rising up, not crashing down. And there were people in the waves. Not drowning, reaching, their arms too long, smiles too wide. All of them had my face. Day 4. The door without a room. I found a new door behind the study bookshelf. Not there before. It led to a stairwell that spiraled downward, impossible geometry, corkscrewing into dark salt rock. At the bottom, another window, identical, only this one was open, and through it, I heard my own voice, screaming, "Help me!" I said yes. Final night, crossing over the study window cracked, a single web of salt crust splitting down the center. Outside, the stars in the wrong sea formed words. "You looked too long." My reflection disappeared. Now the mirror showed the study empty, but someone was still breathing in the room. Salt water pooled at my feet, and the window opened inward. From the other side, I stepped through, smiling. Epilogue. Views unavailable. The house is now sealed. Realty sites list it as unstable architecture. But the window's still there. Sometimes at night, neighbors see it glowing faintly. And if you take a photo of the house, there's always a person standing in the upstairs window, waving from the wrong side of the glass. They say the house was built entirely from salvaged shipwrecks. Planks torn from broken hulls. Nails rusted from old masts. Even the windows came from storm-lost vessels. It looked beautiful in a Gothic, salt-bitten way. But the sea didn't forget what was stolen from it. And neither did the souls lost in the wood. Day 1. The whispering grain. I noticed it the first night. The walls creaked in rhythm. Not with the wind, but like sails catching ghost wind. The bedroom door rattled once, then swung open on its own. No draft.
No breeze.
Just the scent of rotted rope and wet iron. As I drifted to sleep, I swore the floorboards breathed. Day 2. The nail that bled while fixing a crooked painting. I stepped on a nail. Old. Iron. Deep. I limped to the sink, cursing. But when I turned around, the nail was gone. And in its place, a black spot on the floor the size of a coin. The stain pulsed. That night, I woke to a new sound. A rope swinging from the rafters above the stairwell. Back and forth. No rope had been there the day before. Day 3. The names in the wood. I peeled back some wallpaper in the hall. Underneath, dozens of carved names, etched deep into the planks. Some crossed out, some circled in red chalk, and one freshly scratched. My name. Beneath it, a small, recent phrase. Below decks tonight. I didn't write it, but I dreamed of water rushing into tight corridors, lanterns swaying, and screams in the dark. Day 4. The cabin that forms. There was now a hatch in the floor I hadn't seen, near the kitchen island.
Ruststained, bolted shut.
When I pried it open, the air that escaped smelled like deep brine and mildew-soaked parchment. Inside, a small wooden stair leading down to a single room. A cabin, complete with bunk, table, and porthole. It hadn't been on the blueprint. There was even a logbook on the desk. On the open page, stowaway found, offered to the tide. Final night. The sea reclaims. The storm hit fast. Waves pounded the dunes. The wood of the house trembled. Not from wind, but in anticipation. From every wall, voices rose. Different accents, different languages, all begging, or laughing, or weeping, and the hatch yawned wider. The stair pulled down, and water, black and warm, began to rise from the seams in the floor. I backed away, but the planks moved beneath me, guiding me toward the hatch. And from the dark, a hand reached up, splintered and barnacled, wearing a ring that matched mine. Epilogue. The salvaged house. The house still stands. Beautiful, weathered, timeless. But it's always damp, and no inspector can figure out why. Sometimes, guests hear creaking beneath them, like footsteps on a deck. And if you knock on the bedroom wall at night, it knocks back. Twice for yes, once for join us. I wasn't supposed to find the bones. The tide pool was hidden behind a cluster of jagged rocks, far from the usual beach trail. I only saw it because the light hit just right, glinting off something in the sand. A tooth, human, still red. But when I turned to leave, the tide pool rippled, even though the sea was calm, and something in that water whispered, "Dig, you owe me." Day 1. The ripple without wind. The house sat on the cliff's edge, a short hike from the tide pool. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The ripples, the tooth. That night, I dreamed of a man buried face down in the sand, arms bent behind him, and someone, me, piling rocks on his back. When I woke, the soles of my feet were wet, and the scent of brine filled the room. Day 2. The grave emerges. I returned during low tide, used a stick to prod the sand where I'd found the tooth. 6 inches down, my stick hit something soft, then a hand, wrapped in seaweed. It grasped the stick and tugged once before letting go. I ran. But the next morning, I found the stick propped against my bed, wrapped in wet kelp. Day 3. The tide that comes indoors. It didn't rain, but puddles formed in the hallway. Salt crystals outlined my bathtub drain, and my shower turned itself on at 3:03 a.m. The mirror fogged, and a message appeared, "Face me this time." I tore the shower curtain back. Empty, but a small shell sat in the tub. When I picked it up, it cut my palm. Inside it, another tooth. Day 4. The confession beneath. I returned to the tide pool, this time with gloves and a trowel. Dug until I hit bones. A skull jaw wrenched open. Beside it, a leather satchel. Inside, a locket, with my mother's face. She'd never mentioned this place. Never said a word about the summer she vanished for 3 months after high school. Inside the skull's mouth, a note. Buried once, forgotten twice, paid forever. Final night. The tide never leaves. The tide rose too far inland, flooded my front porch, pooled in the living room, sand poured from the fireplace, and in the center of the room, the tide pool formed, glowing faint blue, and inside it the man stood. His face wasn't ruined. It was mine. He reached up, and I watched my own hand grasp his, as the salt filled my lungs. Epilogue. What the water covers they filled in the tide pool with rocks, built a new trail, but sometimes hikers hear splashing where there's no surf. Sometimes beachcombers find a tooth or finger bone in a dry spot. And if you ever dream of a tide pool inland, don't dig, because graves made by water are never truly closed, and what we bury there wants to remember your face. It was the largest conch shell I'd ever seen, resting on the dresser of the upstairs guest room when I moved into the rental. Smooth, pink-lipped, and polished. And when I held it to my ear, it didn't sound like the ocean. It sounded like breathing, sometimes talking, and sometimes screaming. Day 1. What the shell said the first night. I joked about it on a call with my sister. Screaming shell. Maybe it's haunted. She laughed. But that night, while brushing my teeth, I heard whispering through the walls. He told. Now you must hush him. I turned. The shell had moved, closer to the sink. Wet sand beneath it, even though I hadn't brought it into the bathroom. Day 2. The voices get specific this time. I heard names inside the shell. People I knew. My old roommate from college. A guy from work I barely spoke to. And they weren't speaking to me. They were talking about things they'd done. Shameful things. Dark things. Secrets never spoken aloud. And then the shell whispered, "They will all know, unless you hush them." Day 3. The house learns. The whispers grew louder, no longer confined to the shell. They echoed through vents, radiated from faucets. I tried locking the shell in a cabinet. It ended up in my bed, resting on my pillow, next to my ear. That night I dreamed of drowning, not in water, but in confessions, spoken in every voice I'd ever known. The shell was open-mouthed on my chest. Day 4. The sins spill out every time I stepped outside. I heard secrets. A child lying to his mother. A man texting someone else's wife. A woman planning to leave her husband in the dead of night. The world became transparent, soaked in whispers. When I smashed the shell against the rocks, it cracked. And from the break spilled teeth. Dozens. Human. Polished. Arranged to spell. Too late. You're the shell now. Final night. The listening doesn't stop. My ears began to bleed. I tried earplugs. Headphones. Didn't matter. Every breath around me became a confession. Even my own thoughts echoed aloud. And the house pulsed with sound. Every beam. Every pipe. Every grain of sand beneath the floor. Until silence became impossible. Until my voice whispered back, I hear you. And now, so will they. Epilogue. Never listen too closely. They say the house is quiet now. But the shell remains. Someone tried to throw it into the sea. It always returns. Always dry. Always resting on the dresser in the guest room. And if you hold it to your ear, you won't hear the ocean. You'll hear your own voice, telling truths you've never spoken aloud. The beach house had a mirror in every room. That was the first thing I noticed. Not decorative old, tarnished, freestanding things. Silvered glass warped like water. Even the bathrooms had 2 mirrors. And when I moved in, there was a note on the kitchen table. Only look when you're alone. Never when the light flickers. And if they look back, let them in. Day 1. The smile that wasn't mine. I caught my reflection grinning in the hallway mirror. Problem was, I wasn't smiling. When I moved, it lagged by half a second. The smile faded, replaced by wide eyes.
Mine.
But not mine. A knock came at the window. I checked. No one outside. Just a smear on the glass. A palm print facing inward. Day 2. Reflections multiply. Every mirror began fogging on its own. Even with the windows open, I wiped one clean and saw 2 versions of myself. One standing behind me, its mouth open too wide, as if dislocating. And then it spoke. I already live here. You're the guest. I broke the mirror with a chair. But by nightfall it was whole again. Polished. Inviting. Day 3. The room that duplicates the guest room now had 2 beds. Only one of which I bought. The second was unmade, damp, and neatly set with folded clothes that matched mine. The mirror on its wall showed a different sunrise. Red sky, ocean too calm, and someone asleep in the second bed. Breathing, face turned away. I left the room, but heard my voice whisper, Don't lock the door. I'll be back soon. Day 4. Crossing over the hallway, mirrors pulsed like water. I saw the other house clearly now, my double moving freely through it, sometimes staring back, sometimes mouthing words I hadn't spoken yet. I touched the mirror. It was warm, and my reflection stepped forward from its side to mine, smiled, and said, Your turn. Then I blacked out. Final night. The guest in my skin. I woke on the floor, alone. But when I checked the mirrors, I wasn't in them. The reflection was gone. Rooms behind glass were slightly off, furniture mismatched, sea churning backward, windows pulsing like lungs. I pounded the glass, begged, but the guest in my body just straightened my collar, smiled, and left the house. And now I watch, from the inside, as someone else lives my life. Epilogue. Reflections that refuse. The beach house is still listed for rent. People leave after a few days, complaining of bad angles or feeling watched. But if you stay long enough, you'll notice your reflection doesn't always follow you. And if you ever hear a knock at the mirror, whatever you do, don't answer. Every lighthouse is supposed to guide you home. This one wasn't. It sat crumbling at the edge of the inlet, behind my rental cottage, where the cliffs bit into the sky like teeth. Locals said the beacon hadn't worked in decades. But on my third night, I saw it flash. Once, twice, then pulse steadily in a pattern that felt familiar. Like it was spelling something. Like it was calling for me. Day 1. The light with no source. The tower wasn't connected to power. Rusty. Condemned. Still, the beam turned once at 1:13 a.m. swept across my bedroom window. Lit up the room in a color I couldn't name. A blend of deep green and black, like seaweed in moonlight. My phone flickered on its own. Message received. You're drifting. Anchor now. I hadn't texted anyone, but it was from my number. Day 2. The fog without weather at dawn. A dense wall of fog rolled in. Only around the lighthouse. The rest of the coast was clear. I hiked down to investigate. Boots sinking into sand that felt strangely warm. The tower's door hung open. Inside, a spiral stair swallowed by darkness. But from the base echoed faint mechanical clicks, like gears turning, and a soft hum, like a voice lost in static. Still searching, still burning, still hungry. Day 3. The keeper's log hidden behind a broken panel in the cottage was a bundle of pages. Beacon log J. Mercer entries dated back to 1952. But the handwriting changed halfway through. Newer ink. Shake your lines. The last entry. The light doesn't shine out anymore. Turns inward, showing only what it wants to bring back. Underneath, scribbled violently, if you dream of the SEA, do not wake near the light. Day 4. The signal repeats at precisely 1:13 a.m. The beacon shone again. This time it didn't sweep. It locked directly on my window. The light throbbed. I covered my eyes, but behind the lids, I still saw shapes. A ship, half buried in kelp. A face underwater, staring upward. A hand pounding against porthole glass. When I looked again, the light had formed a symbol in the room. A compass rose melting into a spiral. My reflection blinked. I did not. Final night. The pull the tower called to me. Not metaphorically, literally pulled. Every step toward it felt like gravity shifting. Inside, the stairwell was gone, replaced by a shaft of water stretching endlessly down. At its base, I saw the source of the light. An eye. Massive. Turning. Searching. It blinked once. The room filled with salt. And I stepped forward. Or maybe fell. Epilogue. Light on the wrong side. The lighthouse no longer shines. But boats still report strange flashes near the cliff. Deep green, rotating slowly. Some nights, the light scans the horizon for hours. Other times, it locks on a single beach house. And if you see that beam in your window, don't look, because it's not trying to save you. It's trying to bring you back. There was only one buoy offshore. Rust red, anchored half a mile out. The realtor said it had been there since the 60s. Some old Coast Guard relic. But it rang every night at 2:12 a.m. Not a bell, not a foghorn. It screamed. And every night, the scream got closer. Day 1. The sound over water. The house was cozy, modernized. Nothing felt haunted until I cracked a window at midnight. The sound drifted in from the ocean. A shriek. Long, human. Agonized. I stepped out onto the deck. The buoy rocked gently in the moonlight. Still far out. Still anchored. But the scream hit again. And the glass in the windows shivered. Day 2. The anchor washes up. A rusted chain washed onto the shore. Thick. Ancient. Still wet. I followed it back down the beach. It disappeared into the surf. And that night, the scream came at 2:06 a.m. Then 2:04. Then 2:01. Closer each time. I tried to record it, but the audio was corrupted. Just static and faint bubbling. And underneath it, a whisper. "Why'd you leave me there?" Day 3. The dreams of drowning, I dreamt of open water. Black, endless, floating on my back, unable to move. Then hands, pale, bloated, gripping my ankles and pulling me down. And just before I sank, I saw the buoy above, its base wide open like a mouth, filled with teeth made of anchors. When I woke, salt water spilled from my nose. My ears rang with the echo of a scream. Day 4. It's not anchored anymore. The buoy had moved 50 yards closer to the shore. The chain was gone from the beach. Neighbors denied ever seeing or hearing it, insisted there was no buoy there at all. But I could see it clearly now. And when I watched it through binoculars at sunset, it blinked. Not a trick of light. A lidless, round eye at its top, looking directly at me. Final night. The voice that isn't mine at 2:00 a.m. I woke speaking a language I'd never learned, choking on sea brine. The scream blasted through the house. Not from outside, but from the drain. Toilet, shower, kitchen sink, all howling in unison. And in the mirror, my mouth stayed open too long, as if waiting for something to crawl out. I ran to the window. The buoy was gone, but at the edge of the surf stood a figure, wrapped in seaweed, holding a length of chain, and smiling with rusted teeth. Epilogue. Don't mark the water. The buoy still returns after storms. Sometimes it stays just one night, other times for a week. But the screaming always resumes at 2:12 a.m. And those who hear it often vanish soon after, shoes left on the shore, footprints walking into the waves. If you see the buoy, don't listen. And whatever you do, don't follow the sound. Because it's not calling for help. It's calling for you. The ceiling shouldn't drip, especially not when it's bone dry above. But in the back bedroom of the coastal house I rented for fall break, the ceiling began to weep. Not down, but up. Tiny droplets of salt water rising off the floorboards and collecting on the plaster. And when the light hit them just right, I saw faces reflected in each one. All open-mouthed, all drowning. Day 1. Gravity in reversal. It started subtly. Sand clinging to the ceiling instead of my shoes. Furniture creaking upward at night. Legs straining slightly off the floor. I placed a glass of water on the table. At 3:10 a.m. it drained. Not spilling, but flowing up into the ceiling. I touched the spot above. It was cold. Wet. And a heartbeat pulsed behind the drywall. Day 2. The unflooded flood woke to the smell of seawater. Panicked. Assumed the house had flooded. But the water wasn't on the floor. It hung in the air like mist. Thin droplets hovering near the ceiling like upside-down rain. I walked beneath them. One touched my cheek, cold, heavy. And suddenly I couldn't breathe. Not because I was choking, but because my lungs filled from above. Day 3. The man on the ceiling that night, I saw him. A shape clinging to the ceiling corner like a spider. Naked, gray-blue skin stretched thin. Eyes black and streaming. He stared at me without blinking. And as I backed away, he whispered, "We all rise here." Eventually, I ran. But the hallway was upside down. Carpet on the ceiling, pictures hung inverted. And from each frame, the eyes bled upward. Day 4. The other floor, I ripped up the floorboards, hoping to find water damage, mold, anything normal. Instead, there was another ceiling beneath, flat, white,
soaking wet.
And painted across it, letters I hadn't noticed before. The sea was never below. You were. Then the boards resealed, on their own, and salt water trickled upward from the cracks. Final night. When the floor falls up at 3:10 a.m., the furniture lifted. Chairs, lamp, bed, all slowly peeling from the floor and drifting to the ceiling like it was now the ground. My body rose next. I tried to fight it, but the pressure reversed inside my veins. And as I hit the ceiling, I passed through it, into a room that mirrored mine, but older, and filled with others, all floating, all drowning silently in the air. Epilogue. The ceiling never dried. That back room is sealed now. But if you press your ear to the door, you'll hear dripping. And if you peek through the keyhole, don't be surprised if someone's staring back, upside down, smiling, and waiting for the next person to fall upward. From the outside, the house looked normal. Coastal, weather-beaten, wide front steps, the scent of salt always in the air. But inside, the floorboards were filled with sand. Beneath the glass tiles of the hallway, it sifted constantly, always falling, always shifting downward. The owner called it decorative. But I saw something else. Tiny shadows moving in the grains. And sometimes, when I stood still long enough, I felt myself sinking. Day 1. Time runs backward. The wall clock ticked in reverse. At first I assumed it was broken. But when I checked my watch, it too had begun to unwind. Each hour back instead of forward. The sand in the hallway deepened slightly underfoot. And at midnight, a voice whispered, "You have until it empties." I didn't know what it was, until I stepped into the bathroom and saw a massive hourglass embedded in the floor. My reflection in the glass was younger than it should have been. Day 2. Shadows in the grains. I tried filming the sand beneath the glass tile. But on playback, the video showed something impossible. Tiny people. Hundreds. Each one sinking slowly, arms raised, mouths open in silent screams. My voice on the video whispered something I hadn't said. 1 grain per sin. 1 second per lie. When I blinked, the image flickered and one of the tiny figures looked up and smiled. Day 3. Digging back, I tried to lift the tiles, to dig into the sand. But the deeper I reached, the further it dropped. A vortex, soft at first, then pulling. I cut my hand on the tile edge. The blood didn't drip down. It rose, sank into the sand like water into paper. That night, I woke to find my younger self at the edge of the bed, 7 years old, eyes blank, mouthing silently, "You left me in here. Finish it." Day 4, reversal. The rooms reversed positions. Kitchen where the bedroom had been. The hallway now a staircase descending into nowhere. My clothing reversed seams. My body began aching in old, forgotten places. Surgeries undone, scars unformed. I passed a mirror, and my face was 20 years younger, but crying. The sand in the hallway rose up to my knees, and voices began humming from below. Almost empty, almost time. Final night. When the last grain falls, the hourglass now hung in the living room, suspended, turning slowly. I watched the last grain hover, then begin to fall upward, returning to the top. And with it, the house reset. Furniture disappeared. Walls peeled back. My name faded from mail and keys. And I stood, naked and new, in the center of the room. Hands smaller, voice higher. Back to the day I first lied about what happened that night at the shore. And from the sand, a chorus whispered, "This time, tell the truth." Epilogue. House for lease again. The listing goes up every 3 months. Renters always report odd dreams, lost time, and weird childlike memories. But none stay long. The sand always knows. And when the hourglass turns again, the next story begins. Just be careful what you bury in a house made of time, because the past is waiting beneath your feet.